Rick's car battery contains entire universes where billions work their whole lives, thinking they're free, but they're actually just powering his brake lights. Villagers and Mr. Jellybean's kingdom found a lockbox of child abuse photos and burned them to preserve their pedophile king's legacy. Morty lived 55 years as Roy Parsons, only to die falling off a ladder at a carpet store and woke up screaming, "Where's my wife?" And those are just 3 of the cursed Rick and Morty haunted universes in this video. Can you imagine all the nightmare dimensions there are to uncover when we dive deep into 2 hours of Rick and Morty lore to fall asleep to, but it's haunted universes over the next 2 hours? I was certainly shocked by some of the stuff I found when I made this video, so if you're ready to be blown away by what's about to come, sit back, relax, maybe don't look directly into any truth tortoises or death crystals, and let's begin. So Rick Sanchez, the smartest man in the universe, his words, not mine, managed to turn the entire planet into a David Croninberg body horror film because his grandson wanted to rizz up Jessica at a school dance. That's it. That's the setup. A horny teenager asked Grandpa for help getting a date, and Rick's solution was basically, here's a love potion. What could go wrong? Spoiler alert. Literally everything. This whole disaster goes down in Rick Potion number 9, and it's the moment the show stops being just another wacky sci-fi cartoon. Here's the thing about Rick. The guy can build a spaceship out of garbage, create sentient AI, and travel through infinite dimensions, but somehow, quality control on a basic love serum didn't make the checklist. Morty wanted to impress Jessica at the flu season dance, because nothing says romance like rhinovirus season, and Rick whipped up a concoction based on vole DNA. Voles mate for life, so naturally that seemed like solid science to Rick. He did mention it might be an issue if Jessica had the flu, but then immediately shrugged it off like he was commenting on the weather. This is the equivalent of handing someone a loaded gun and going, just don't point it at anything important, probably. The serum worked exactly as terribly as you'd expect. Jessica got infected, sneezed, and suddenly the whole school wanted to jump Morty's bones. Then things escalated faster than a zombie outbreak in a Resident Evil game. The love potion piggybacked on the flu virus, went airborne, and spread across the entire planet. Every single person on Earth became obsessed with one awkward 14-year-old kid. Rick's first fix involved mantis DNA, because mantises are the opposite of voles, which is the kind of logic that makes you wonder if Rick was already drunk. This turned everyone into mantis people who still wanted Morty but now also wanted to eat him afterward. Very romantic. The third attempt involved throwing every random animal DNA into a blender. Koala, rattlesnake, chimpanzee, cactus, shark, golden retriever, and dinosaur, because apparently that adds up to normal humanity. It's like Rick was playing Pokemon Fusion, but forgot he was dealing with real people. When Morty questioned this math, Rick basically told him to shut up and trust the process. The process turned everyone into grotesque flesh monsters that the show lovingly dubbed Croninbergs. Congratulations, Rick, you just turned Earth into a walking nightmare. So what does Rick do when faced with the consequences of his actions? Accept responsibility? Try to fix it? Nope. He grabs Morty and portals them to a different dimension where a different Rick managed to solve the problem. Then they immediately died in an explosion. Our Rick and Morty just stepped into their dead counterparts' shoes, like they were swapping SIM cards. Problem solved, for them, anyway. Back in Croninberg world, their original dimension, Beth, Jerry, and Summer, are still alive. And here's the twist. They're actually thriving. Mad Max Jerry, with his eye patch and crowbar, is having the time of his life. The guy who couldn't change a light bulb without supervision somehow became a post-apocalyptic warrior. Beth and Jerry's marriage, which was hanging by a thread before all this, is suddenly solid gold. They're roasting Croninberg meat over a fire, living in an armored van, and actually happy together. Summer's performing one-woman shows in a cardboard box, honestly. Not much weirder than her original hobby of scrolling through social media. They explicitly say they don't miss Rick and Morty at all. Think about that for a second. Rick literally destroyed the world, abandoned his entire family except Morty, and that family ended up better off for it. The apocalypse became their couple's therapy. Jerry finally found a situation where his mediocrity was actually useful. Beth got the adventure she'd been craving. Summer got creative. They became the family they could never be when Rick was around, because Rick's presence in their lives was somehow more toxic than living in a Croninberg hellscape. And they're still there, right now, living in that nightmare world that Rick created and abandoned. Every episode we watch with our Rick and Morty is technically a lie, because the real Smith family, the original one, is in a different dimension roasting mutant meat and not thinking about the grandfather who left them behind. That's the real horror of Croninberg world, not the monsters, the abandonment, Now, let's move on to the replacement dimension's backyard grave. The replacement dimension's backyard grave. In the same episode, there are 2 corpses buried in the Smith family's backyard, and nobody except Rick and Morty knows about it. Like, imagine mowing the lawn and not realizing you're literally walking over your son's dead body. That's the situation Jerry's been in since Rick Potion number 9, and he has absolutely no clue. The family's been living their normal suburban life barbecues, arguing about Netflix choices, whatever, all while decomposing versions of Rick and Morty rot in shallow graves about 20 feet from the patio. It's like a really dark episode of Home Improvement. Here's what happened. After Rick turned his original dimension into Croninberg world, he and Morty dimension hopped to find a reality where everything worked out. They found one dimension cone 31, where that universe's Rick successfully created the cure and reversed all the mutations. Everyone was back to normal, humanity was saved, and Rick was probably about to accept a Nobel Prize or whatever. Then, 3 seconds later, his ionic defibrillator exploded and killed both him and Morty instantly. Just straight up, Final Destination them, right there in the garage. One moment they're celebrating, next moment they're extra crispy. Our Rick and Morty portaled in, saw their own corpses, and Rick's solution was essentially dibs on their lives. No hesitation, no moral crisis, just pragmatic identity theft on an existential level. They dragged the bodies outside. Rick grabbed Rick, Morty grabbed Morty, very democratic, buried them in the backyard, and walked into the house to assume their lives. This is like witness protection, but you're hiding from yourself. The family has no idea. Beth, Jerry, and Summer think their Rick and Morty just had another weird adventure and came home like normal. They don't know these are dimensional refugees who killed their original family members. Technically, the universe killed them, but still, every hug is with strangers. Every I love you is directed at people wearing their loved ones' faces like masks. It's psychological horror, disguised as sitcom normalcy. Summer mows the lawn. Let that sink in. Summer pushes the lawnmower over the patch of dirt where her real brother is buried, probably complaining about doing chores and taking selfies. She has no idea she's maintained her brother's grave for years. Jerry probably planned a garden there at some point. Beth might have had Summer's graduation party with the dessert table positioned directly over Morty's corpse. Family photos, birthday parties, normal suburban life happening directly above a crime scene that isn't technically a crime. And Morty has to live with this every single day. He walks past that spot and knows. He sits at the dinner table with a family that isn't technically his family and pretends everything's fine. When Summer hugs him, that's the sister of a dead kid buried in the yard. When Beth says, "I love you," she's talking to a corpse's replacement. Morty's entire existence in this dimension is stolen. He's a cuckoo bird that knows it's a cuckoo bird. The show played this moment perfectly. Morty walks back into the house after burying himself, looks around at his family with this 1,000-yard stare, and sits on the couch in complete shell shock. That's trauma. That's the moment a 14-year-old kid realizes he's living in someone else's life and can never, ever tell anyone. It's like the universe's worst version of catfishing. Rick treats this like it's no big deal. He explicitly tells Morty they can do this 3 or 4 more times, tops, before they run out of convenient dimensions where they die right after saving the world. He's got a punch card system for identity theft. This is his emergency backup plan. If things get too messed up, just find a dimension where you succeeded and then died, steal that life, and start over. The backyard grave is Rick's version of a safety net. But here's the thing that really haunts this situation. Those graves represent the only version of Rick and Morty who actually fixed their mistakes. The ones buried in the backyard were better than our protagonists. They solved the problem. They saved their world. They were heroes for approximately 3 seconds before physics said nope. And now they're worm food, while our Rick and Morty, the ones who failed, who ran away, are living the lives those better versions earned. That's what makes the backyard grave so disturbing. It's a monument to failure, wearing success's clothes. Alright, moving on to The Vat of Acid's 1,000 Abandoned Timelines. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's next. The Vat of Acid's 1,000 Abandoned Timelines. Morty Smith became a serial killer because he wanted a do-over button for his life. Not metaphorically, literally. He murdered thousands of alternate versions of himself across infinite dimensions. And the worst part is, he didn't even know he was doing it until Rick told him afterward. That's just Tuesday for Rick Sanchez. This whole nightmare unfolds in The Vat of Acid episode 8 of Season 4, and it starts with the dumbest argument imaginable. Rick creates a fake vat of acid as an emergency escape plan, complete with air hoses and quick-release bones for authenticity, and Morty roasts him for it. The plan sucks, sure, but Morty takes it personally and starts pitching his own idea. A video game save point device that lets you reload your life, like you're playing Skyrim. Rick says it's stupid. Morty says Rick can't build it, and Rick responds the way any mature genius would, by building the thing purely out of spite. This is like if your dad built a fully functional Iron Man suit just to win an argument about who left the garage door open. The device works exactly how Morty wanted. Press the button, create a save point, do whatever you want, then reset back to that moment with all your memories intact. It's every teenager's fantasy redo that embarrassing thing you said to your crush. Try dangerous stunts without consequences, eat an entire pizza, and reset before the calories count. Morty goes absolutely feral with it. He flashes his teacher, who has a broken heart, from a Renaissance fair juggler, because this show is insane. He gets closer to Jessica by manufacturing perfect moments. He basically speedruns life optimization like he's trying to get a world record on YouTube. The montage is set to Eric Clapton's "It's in the Way That You Use It," and Morty's living his best life. He's confident. He's cool. Jessica notices him. He's finally the main character of his own story, instead of Rick's sidekick. And then Rick pulls the rug out, in the most Rick way possible, by explaining that Morty's been committing genocide this entire time. Here's the thing Rick built, not a time machine, because Rick doesn't respect time travel, and if Ant-Man and the Wasp can do it, I'm not interested. But a device that splits probable realities. Every time Morty pressed reset, he wasn't going back in time. He was jumping into a parallel dimension at the moment he wanted to restart. And the Morty already living in that dimension? Incinerated, vaporized, deleted to make room for our Morty to take his place. It's the Prestige, but with interdimensional teenager murder instead of Victorian magicians. Every single time Morty reloaded to smell Jessica's hair again, or relive a satisfying fart, yes, really, he killed another version of himself. Thousands of them. Rick kept count. And here's the truly horrifying part. Those dimensions didn't disappear. They're still out there. Every timeline where Morty vanished mid-conversation, every reality where he died doing something stupid and reckless, every dimension where his family buried him, those all still exist. They're haunted by the memory of a Morty who was there 1 second and gone the next. Think about what that means for the people left behind. There are thousands of Jessicas who watched Morty literally vanish into thin air, thousands of Beths who buried their son, thousands of Summers who lost their brother, and none of them know why. They just know Morty disappeared or died, and they had to move on. Some probably think he ran away. Some think he committed suicide. Some watched him die doing something insane and never got an explanation. Those aren't theoretical timelines. According to Rick's explanation, they're real. They happened. Somewhere. The episode ends with Rick offering to merge the probable realities so only one Morty experienced everything. But that doesn't erase what happened. Those moments existed. Those deaths occurred. Those families grieved. Morty can consolidate the guilt, but he can't undo the consequences. The abandoned timelines remain abandoned ghost dimensions haunted by a kid who wanted to replay his life until he got it perfect, and didn't realize he was leaving corpses in his wake. That's the real horror of the Vat of Acid episode, not the fake acid. The real acid was Morty dissolving the line between consequence-free fun and interdimensional manslaughter, one reset at a time. Okay, next up is the Council's dead Ricks. 27 Ricks died, and nobody's ever gonna solve their murders. Not because the killer got away, he did, but because everyone thinks the case is closed. The Council of Ricks thinks they caught the guy. The families got their Ricks returned as corpses. And somewhere out there, evil Morty is living his best life, knowing he orchestrated the most elaborate serial killing spree in interdimensional history. Those 27 dimensions are haunted by the absence of their Ricks, and nobody's coming to help. This whole murder conspiracy kicks off in Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, episode 10 of season 1, and it's basically CSI, Multiverse Edition, except the investigators are all versions of the victim. The Council of Ricks, which is just Ricks, who got tired of being hunted by governments and became the government, the irony is not lost on C-137, discovers that Ricks are being murdered across different timelines, brutally murdered, and the pattern is unprecedented. This is Rick-on-Rick violence, on a scale that shouldn't be possible, because Ricks don't kill each other. They argue, they compete, they form bureaucratic nightmare councils, but they don't commit Rickicide, except someone did. The council immediately blames C-137 Rick, because he's the malcontent, the rogue, the Rick who refused to join their stupid club. They scan his portal gun and find that he visited every single murder scene, which is the kind of evidence that would get you convicted on literally any crime show ever made. C-137 escapes, because, of course he does, and tracks down the real killer to prove his innocence. What he finds is worse than just a murderous Rick. He finds evil Rick, who built a torture dome covered in hundreds of screaming Mortys, being constantly stabbed to create a Morty shield that hides him from other Rick's detection. It's like if Hannibal Lecter was also an electrical engineer with a PhD in making teenagers suffer. But here's the twist that makes this haunted. Evil Rick wasn't the killer. He was a puppet. The Ricks who investigated his corpse found wires and electronics woven through his brain, a remote control setup where someone else was driving. Evil Rick was a meat robot being piloted by the actual murderer, who turned out to be Evil Morty, the one with the eye patch who seemed innocent and traumatized the whole time. He crushes the transmitter, removes his eye patch, and walks away into the crowd of rescued Mortys. Nobody suspects him. Nobody investigates further. Case closed. Evil Morty invented murder by proxy on an interdimensional scale and got away completely clean. Those 27 dead Ricks came from 27 different dimensions. They had families. They had Mortys. They had Beths and Jerrys and Summers who woke up one morning and found their Rick's body, or got a visit from the council with bad news, or maybe just never saw him again. Some of those families are still waiting. Some think their Rick abandoned them. Some buried empty caskets because the body was too brutalized to return. The council sent the Ricks home and moved on, but those dimensions didn't get closure. They got graves and questions. And here's what makes it worse. Evil Morty is still out there. He escaped the Citadel, blended in with hundreds of other rescued Mortys, and disappeared into infinity. The council thinks they solved the case. They think Evil Rick was a lone wolf who went rogue. They have no idea they're dealing with a Morty smart enough to frame a Rick, puppet another Rick, torture hundreds of Mortys, and walk away without anyone suspecting. Those 27 dimensions are haunted by murders that will never be solved because everyone thinks they already were. The families of those dead Ricks are living in the worst kind of horror, the kind where you have answers, but they're wrong. They know how their Rick died. They've mourned. They've moved on. But they don't know why. They don't know it was a Morty, which shouldn't even be possible. They don't know their Rick died as collateral damage in a scheme to frame C-137. They don't know that somewhere in the infinite multiverse, the real killer is out there, free, and possibly planning his next move. Those dimensions are haunted by closure that never came, and justice that never will. 27 obituaries written for a crime that's still unsolved, even though everyone thinks it's over. Let's jump into Anatomy Park, inside the rotting corpse. Rick Sanchez turned a homeless man into a theme park. Not like gave him a job at a theme park or built a theme park and named it after him. Literally shrunk people down, injected them into his body, and monetized his organs as tourist attractions. Pirates of the Pancreas, Bladder Falls, Spleen Mountain. This is what happens when you give an alcoholic genius venture capital and zero oversight. Ruben the homeless man became Ruben the living amusement park, which eventually became Ruben the rotting corpse with teenagers trapped inside. This whole body horror disaster goes down in Anatomy Park, episode 3 of season 1, and it starts on Christmas because apparently Rick thought the holidays needed more nightmare fuel. Rick shrinks Morty down to microscopic size and injects him into Ruben to find Dr. Xenon Bloom, his business partner, who co-created this medical monstrosity. The park's security system has failed, which means all the diseases they've been keeping as living museum exhibits are now loose and hunting people. Hepatitis A, tuberculosis, gonorrhea that can't see you if you don't move, except Dr. Bloom was thinking of a T-Rex, so that advice is useless. It's Jurassic Park, but the dinosaurs are STDs, which is somehow both more and less terrifying. Morty meets the skeleton crew still working inside Ruben, Dr. Bloom, a sentient blob of goo with glasses, Poncho, aggressive security guy, Roger, tech specialist, Annie, cute girl, Morty immediately crushes on, and Alexander, poor bastard in a dog mascot costume. They're all trapped inside a dying man, trying to reach the emergency evacuation point in the colon, because the digestive tract is the exit strategy. The symbolism writes itself. Meanwhile, outside in the real world, Jerry's dealing with his parents bringing home their polyamorous boyfriend Jacob for Christmas, which is its own kind of body horror but significantly less fatal. Things escalate faster than a contamination outbreak in a Resident Evil game. Alexander gets coughed out of Ruben's lungs and dies screaming as his skin peels off. Ruben's heart stops, so now they're inside a corpse that's actively decomposing. Roger gets his foot stuck in machinery and drowns when the sphincter dam bursts, flooding everything with Ruben's final bowel movement. Poncho reveals he's been the saboteur the whole time, released the tuberculosis to steal bubonic plague and sell it to terrorists. He specifically lists Republicans, which aged interestingly. He falls to his death after bubonic plague bites him, Dr. Bloom sacrifices himself operating the bone train so Morty and Annie can escape. By the time Morty and Annie reach the nipple, the exit point, they've watched 3 people die in increasingly grotesque ways inside a dead, homeless man. Hepatitis C gives them a thumbs up and saves them from hepatitis A, because apparently some diseases are just good guys. Rick flies his spaceship into the nipple to extract them, then kicks Ruben's corpse into space, uses a growth ray to make him the size of a small country, and detonates dynamite inside him. Ruben explodes over the continental United States, raining blood and viscera across the entire country. The news reports, giant naked sky Santa has exploded, and tells everyone not to worry. America collectively shrugs and goes back to their phones. The immediate aftermath is that Rick loses his business partner, and his investment literally explodes over North America. Annie survives and tells Rick she can rebuild Anatomy Park, so Rick immediately shrinks her down and injects her into another person, Ethan, Summer's boyfriend, to start over. Morty had a genuine romantic connection with Annie, and Rick just yoinked her away into someone else's body without asking. Classic Rick move, treating people like interchangeable parts for his projects. The long-term horror is that Rick's already building Anatomy Park 2 inside Ethan. The post-credits scene shows Rick on a conference call with the new team, and they're trying to explain that Pirates of the Pancreas doesn't make biological sense, because pancreases make insulin, not pirates. Rick loses his mind and hangs up on them, screaming that they're building a monument to compromise. Somewhere, Ethan is walking around with a corporate marketing team inside his body, having meetings about brand synergy. That's the real nightmare, not the death, but the fact that Rick learned nothing and immediately started over with presumably the same security vulnerabilities that got people killed the first time. Ruben never consented to any of this. He was just a homeless veteran with health problems who Rick checked on once a year. Now he's space debris. Moving forward to Tiny Rick's mental prison, and go ahead and subscribe. More crazy stuff like this coming soon. Rick Sanchez basically put his brain in witness protection and then forgot to tell his brain it was in witness protection. The witness protection program was a 16-year-old clone body. The threat he was hiding from was his own depression, and the whole thing backfired so spectacularly that he ended up screaming for help, while an entire high school danced to his literal cries for rescue. This is like if Tony Soprano went into therapy, but the therapy was just pretending to be a teenager and hoping that fixed everything. Spoiler, it didn't. This psychological nightmare unfolds in Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, episode 7 of season 2, where Rick decides the solution to being old and miserable is to just not be old anymore. Summer asks him to become a teenager so he can help hunt a vampire at their school, because apparently Coach Ferratu was a real vampire, and nobody noticed his name was 1 letter away from Nosferatu, which is honestly embarrassing for everyone involved. Rick initially says no because he's not an idiot and knows high school sucks, but then he gets bored, which is apparently all the motivation Rick needs to make catastrophically bad decisions. He transfers his consciousness into a younger clone, and boom, Tiny Rick is born, saying Tiny Rick after every sentence like he's auditioning for a Pokemon voice role. Tiny Rick is living his best life. He's cool, he's popular, he kills a vampire gym teacher, 2-for-1 deal on getting rid of terrible people, as he points out, and he gets invited to parties. Morty's finally not a loser because his grandpa is the coolest kid in school. Summer's getting attention from Toby Matthews. Everyone's winning. Meanwhile, in Rick's garage, his original 80-year-old body is rotting in a vat of quantum fluid, like a forgotten science experiment, which, let's be honest, is probably how Rick treats most of his science experiments. Here's where things get full. Black Mirror. Tiny Rick starts making emo art and writing songs, and they're all screaming, "Help me, I'm trapped," in increasingly obvious ways. He performs a song at a house party that literally goes, "Let me out. What you see is not the same person as me. My life's a lie. I'm really old. This isn't me. My real body's slowly dying in a vat." The entire school treats this like it's the hottest new TikTok sound. They're dancing, they're cheering. Jessica thinks it's badass. This is the equivalent of someone texting, "Lol, I'm dying inside," and everyone responding with the laughing emoji instead of checking if they're okay. Summer's the only one who realizes Tiny Rick's SoundCloud rapper lyrics are an actual SOS, because she's apparently the only person in this family with functioning emotional intelligence, which is terrifying when you remember. Summer once tried to join a suicide cult, so the bar here is in hell. Summer tries to save Rick by getting Tiny Rick expelled by reporting him for murder, which, fair, he did murder the gym teacher, even if the gym teacher was a vampire. Tiny Rick responds by turning on her like a rabid influencer whose sponsorship deal fell through. He calls her a fucking psycho nerd, in front of the whole school. Morty sides with Tiny Rick because popularity is a hell of a drug, and when you've spent your whole life being a loser, you're not giving up being cool just because your grandpa's consciousness is trapped in a decaying meat prison. Eventually, Summer and Morty have to physically restrain Tiny Rick and force him to listen to Elliott Smith, the most emo musician imaginable, while hooking electrodes to his head. The sad music breaks through the teenage brain's psychological firewall. Tiny Rick has an existential crisis, and real Rick breaks through screaming about how he's old and dying and please God get him out of there. The transfer back into his old body works, but then Rick casually mentions there are a bunch of dead mez in the garage from failed consciousness transfers. Operation Phoenix, his supposed backup plan for immortality, is basically Russian roulette with extra steps. Tiny Rick wasn't a fun vacation from being old. He was a psychological bear trap that almost killed Rick permanently. The teenage brain didn't liberate him from depression, it just put his depression in a cage and hoped nobody would notice the screaming. Turns out, you can't outrun your own mind by wearing a younger model, which is basically the most expensive midlife crisis lesson anyone could learn. At least he didn't buy a sports car. Now let's shift over to the giant incest baby universe. Morty Smith used a horse breeding mount for personal reasons, lied about it repeatedly, and accidentally created a kaiju-sized sperm army that nearly destroyed Earth before one of them fertilized his sister's egg and became a giant space baby that's currently floating around somewhere hunting astronauts. This is the plot of an actual episode of television that aired on Adult Swim, and honestly, that sentence should probably come with some kind of warning label, like, don't read this while eating, or maybe therapy after. The nightmare kicks off in Rick Dependence Spray, episode 4 of season 5, when Morty visits his mom's horse hospital and discovers a breeding mount, which is exactly what it sounds like, a machine designed to collect reproductive material from stallions. The show uses way grosser terminology, but we're keeping this family-friendly-ish. Morty, being a hormonal 14-year-old with access to industrial-grade equipment, decides this is a fantastic idea and spends a week having the time of his life. Meanwhile, Rick steals what he thinks is a barrel of horse semen from Beth's hospital to make a bioweapon against the Chuds, cannibalistic horse underground dwellers, because of course that's what they're called. Plot twist: the barrel is actually Morty's. Contributions mixed with horse material, because Morty replaced the original barrel and slapped a horse semen label on his shame barrel, like that was gonna fool anyone. Rick exposes the barrel to otherworldly forces to weaponize it, and boom, instant kaiju sperm invasion. These are intelligent monster sperm with trebuchets, not catapults. Rick is very specific about this because apparently medieval siege weapon accuracy matters during the apocalypse. They've got a sperm queen who monologues about being Morty's shame incarnate and knows about every sock, every tissue, every carefully folded landing strip of toilet paper Morty's ever used. She's building an army using the horse breeding machine from Beth's hospital because apparently sperm have collective memory and organizational skills, which is somehow more disturbing than them being giant monsters. The president's solution is peak government efficiency: create a giant human egg to lure the sperm, then nuke them at the Grand Canyon, because symbolically, it tracks on multiple levels, as he points out. They get the egg from Summer, because why wouldn't this episode violate every possible boundary of good taste? Morty finally confesses the truth mid-crisis. I'm a dirty little perverted maniac. I spent a week pleasuring myself with animal equipment, and everyone realizes they're about to create a giant incest baby if the sperm reach Summer's egg. The president tries to abort the mission, literally, but one sperm named Sticky, who Morty befriended earlier in the most Stockholm Syndrome plot point ever, makes it through and fertilizes the egg anyway. Their solution? Launch it into space. Make it space's problem. The fertilized egg gets yeeted into orbit with a "we got a heartbeat" confirmation, and the president goes, "That's a human life, and this is an election cycle. You have to do something." Rick's response: "Nope, it's space's problem now." The post-credits scene shows an astronaut having an emotional moment about abandoning his family. Then the giant incest baby appears in space going goo goo gaga before attacking him. The astronaut screams, "My conscience," as it kills him, which is either the darkest joke about guilt the show's ever made, or just Rick and Morty being Rick and Morty, probably both. So now there's a giant baby floating around in space that's biologically Morty and Summer's child, but also somehow part horse because the original material was mixed with horse semen, and also exposed to interdimensional energy. It's alive, it's conscious, it's hunting people, and it's technically a Smith family member, which means somewhere in the infinite multiverse, there's a dimension where this thing shows up at Thanksgiving dinner, and everyone has to pretend everything's normal. The episode ends with everyone just Moving on. Rick makes out with his chud horseperson girlfriend. Different subplot, equally disturbing. Morty promises to use condoms even when it's butt stuff. The astronaut dies screaming in space while Mission Control asks, "Did you get any of that?" And somewhere in the cosmos, the giant incest baby drifts through the void, growing, learning, existing as a monument to why you shouldn't let teenagers have unsupervised access to industrial breeding equipment. Some mistakes you can't take back. Some mistakes become sentient and float around space eating astronauts. This one's both. Next, we've got the Toxic Universe, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. The Toxic Universe. Rick and Morty went to a day spa and accidentally created Fight Club versions of themselves that live in a dimension made of emotional toxic waste. This is what happens when you try to solve your problems with alien technology instead of just going to therapy like a normal person. Though, to be fair, Rick did say therapists are basically horses trying to fix merry-go-rounds, which is weirdly accurate if you've ever been to therapy. The whole mess kicks off in Rest and Ricklaxation, episode 6 of season 3, right after Rick and Morty barely survive what was supposed to be a 20-minute adventure, but turned into 6 days of near-death experiences. Their proper traumatized hands shaking like they just watched The Ring, crying in the garage, the full PTSD starter pack. Rick literally admits he might hate himself and think he deserves to die, which is the emotional equivalent of your dad suddenly being vulnerable at Thanksgiving and everyone getting uncomfortable. We don't know how to process this. Rick, please go back to burping. So, they hit up an alien spa where the main attraction is getting swallowed by a giant pink creature that pukes you out relaxed 20 minutes later, which sounds like either the best or worst Yelp review ever, depending on your kink tolerance. Some alien employee with a throat-clearing problem that sounds like he's drowning in phlegm offers them a psychological detox that removes cognitive toxins. Rick's immediately suspicious, probably because the guy sounds like he gargles with rubber cement, but Morty drags him into the machine anyway. The detoxifier starts shaking like a washing machine with a brick in it. There's a bright flash, and boom, they get split into healthy versions and toxic versions. Healthy Rick and Morty walk out feeling fantastic, listening to random music together like they're in a Spotify commercial, having wholesome moments that would make Mr. Rogers weep with joy. Meanwhile, Toxic Rick and Toxic Morty wake up in what looks like if someone made a Hot Topic store out of sewage and depression. They're trapped inside the detoxification tank in this gross, mucky hellscape, and Toxic Rick immediately starts screaming about being a genius god while calling everyone inferior pieces of garbage. So, basically just Rick, but with the volume turned up to 11 and 0 filter, which is saying something. Toxic Rick is pure unfiltered id, the kind of guy who would cut you off in traffic and then key his own car just to prove a point. Toxic Morty is his emotional opposite, self-loathing incarnate, convinced everyone hates him. Basically what would happen if Eeyore became sentient mucus. And honestly, poor Toxic Morty, because Toxic Rick genuinely does hate him, so he's not even wrong about that. They're like, if you took every mean thought you've ever had about yourself and others, gave it a body made of Nickelodeon slime, and then trapped it in a dimension that looks like what's under your sink when you haven't cleaned in 6 months. Meanwhile, healthy Morty becomes the most insufferable version of himself possible, the kind of guy who says things like, "We're addicted to our own limitations," on a first date with Jessica, and wonders why she bails. Buddy, that's not depth. That's a LinkedIn motivational post. He ends up becoming a stockbroker who seduces a woman by saying he wants to be good at pleasing her, bad at it, get promoted, fired, have a workplace accident, which is either the smoothest or most disturbing pickup line ever uttered, and I genuinely can't tell which. Toxic Rick eventually MacGyvers his way into calling healthy Rick from inside the tank, because even toxic sludge versions of genius scientists can hack phones, apparently. When healthy Rick feels guilty and wants to re-merge them, healthy Morty literally destroys the phone because he's too healthy to deal with negativity, which is the biggest red flag behavior I've seen outside of a communist parade. Eventually, Toxic Rick tricks them, escapes the tank, builds a machine on top of a moon tower, Austin, Texas, has these, look it up, and tries to toxify the entire planet. We get a montage straight out of the Purge priest screaming, "God is a lie," kids stabbing birthday clowns with forks, teenagers fleeing salad restaurants for McDonald's like they're evacuating Chernobyl. Honestly, this is just regular Florida on a Tuesday. Rick has to shoot Toxic Morty with a nanobotic virus to force Toxic Rick to re-merge, basically holding Morty hostage to manipulate himself, which is either galaxy brain strategy or the saddest thing ever. It works because apparently even the toxic narcissistic parts of Rick still care about Morty, which the show treats as a character flaw. Let that sink in. Rick considers loving his grandson a toxin, and that's more concerning than any therapy session could address. The real kicker? This dimension still exists. Every detoxification machine across the galaxy creates these sentient toxic selves and traps them in psychological sludge prison. Somewhere out there, Toxic Stacy, from Morty's sex dungeon subplot that we're not unpacking right now, is still screaming their safe word, sea cucumber, in an abandoned tank. Some haunted dimensions aren't filled with ghosts, they're filled with the worst parts of yourself you tried to Marie Kondo out of existence but couldn't quite delete. That's just therapy, with extra steps and significantly worse outcomes. Let's head over to Morty's Erased Memories archive. Rick Sanchez has been running an illegal mind wipe operation on his grandson for an unspecified amount of time. And the only reason Morty found out is because he saw a talking tortoise that knew the complete truth of existence and needed that specific trauma deleted. This is like if your therapist was secretly hoarding all your repressed memories in mason jars in their basement, except the therapist is also your alcoholic grandfather, and the basement is an underground bunker full of color-coded vials, organized by whose fault the trauma was, which is somehow both more and less organized than you'd expect from Rick. The whole mind crime revelation happens in Morty's Mind, Blowers, episode 8 of season 3, which is basically the show going, "You wanted interdimensional cable? Too bad. We're doing a clip show of traumatic memories you've never seen instead." And honestly, kind of a power move. Morty's freaking out about the truth tortoise, a crystalline turtle that contains all knowledge in the universe and drives anyone who looks at it completely insane. So basically browsing Wikipedia at 3 a.m., but with immediate and permanent psychological damage. Rick casually mentions he can just erase the memory, and Morty's like, "Wait, you can do that?" Then Rick takes him to his secret underground archive room, full of thousands of memory vials, and breaks the fourth wall to announce they're doing this instead of interdimensional cable, which is the most Rick Sanchez way possible to announce a format change. The archive is color-coded. Blue vials are Morty's fault, purple ones are the family's fault, and red ones are Rick's fault, though Rick denies using color coding because he's not a mouse in a European children's book, which is suspiciously specific. Each vial contains a memory so traumatic that Morty begged Rick to remove it from his brain, and there are thousands of them. We're talking floor-to-ceiling shelving units packed with psychological casualties. This is basically Morty's entire character development stored in tubes like some kind of twisted Pokemon collection, except instead of Charizards, it's that time I accidentally got a guidance counselor killed, and that time I found out squirrels run society. The memories themselves are a greatest hits compilation of psychological damage. There's the Mr. Lunas incident where Morty sees a man on the moon through his telescope, reports it to everyone. Turns out it was a smudge on the lens. And the guidance counselor who looked vaguely moon-shaped kills himself after being outed as a pedophile, which Principal Vagina misunderstood from Morty's moon comments, "This show goes dark." There's Morty accidentally making a Floop-Floopian lose faith in his religion's afterlife, and watching him have an existential breakdown. The Floop-Floopians get eternal orgasmic bliss if killed by a great warrior, but only if they don't doubt it. So Morty basically destroyed this alien's ticket to heaven by asking, "But how do you know?" There's Beth, being forced by an alien warlord to choose which child lives, and she picks Summer without hesitation. Ouch, Morty. That's gonna require intensive therapy that you'll immediately forget. But the haunting centerpiece is the squirrels. Morty uses Rick's animal communication device and overhears squirrels casually discussing destabilizing Argentina's economy, installing puppet regimes in Guatemala, and picking a new pope as backup if the Exxon Monsanto thing in Africa doesn't work out. The squirrels notice he can understand them, immediately go into crisis mode, and Rick has to evacuate the entire dimension because you fucked with squirrels, Morty. They only get a few uses of dimension hopping. Rick said they could only do it 3 or 4 times in Rick Potion #9, and Morty wasted one on squirrels running a shadow government. That reality still exists somewhere, presumably still run by rodent Illuminati. The real horror hits when Rick and Morty forget why they're in the archive and almost commit suicide together before Summer finds them and reveals this is Scenario 4, meaning they've forgotten and nearly killed themselves multiple times doing this exact same thing. There's apparently a whole protocol system for when they wipe their own memories, mid-memory viewing, and try to murder-suicide their way out of existential despair. Summer doesn't even seem that surprised, just annoyed, like this is a regular Tuesday. "I don't get paid enough for this shit," she mutters, while tranquilizing them. The episode ends with Jerry having his own memory archive called Jerry's Mind Blowers, which contains one memory of Jerry accidentally eating an alien they were supposed to save, and everyone goes back to normal. The archive room is still there. The vials keep accumulating. Morty will forget this happened, ask for another memory wipe, and the cycle continues. Some haunted dimensions are full of ghosts. This one's full of a 14-year-old's discarded psychological development, each vial a tombstone for a version of Morty who learned something and then chose to forget. That's just really aggressive avoidance, coping with industrial-grade memory technology. Now moving on to Shoney's fabricated memory dimension, Rick Sanchez got interrogated by aliens trying to steal his portal gun formula, so he trapped them inside a fake memory of a Shoney's restaurant while uploading a virus to their systems and escaping prison. The entire sequence is either the most elaborate jailbreak in television history or Rick doing an Inception speedrun while the interrogator eats imaginary Szechuan sauce, which became a whole thing with McDonald's later, but that's a different rabbit hole we're not going down right now. The whole mind heist goes down in The Rick Shank Redemption, Episode 1 of Season 3, the season premiere that dropped on April Fool's Day because Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon are chaos. Agents. Rick's in Galactic Federation prison, getting his brain scanned by Cornelius Daniel, a bug alien interrogator using a brainalyzer to extract the portal gun formula from Rick's memories. Rick immediately traps the interrogator inside a false memory of Shoney's, a real American family restaurant chain that's basically Denny's but somehow sadder, because apparently Rick considers greasy breakfast food his emotional home, which tracks for a depressed alcoholic genius who thinks Szechuan sauce is the peak of human achievement. Cornelius Daniel wants to see the memory of Rick inventing interdimensional travel, so Rick shows him what appears to be his tragic origin story. Young Rick is working in his garage when Rick Prime, a different Rick from another dimension, shows up offering him portal gun technology and the chance to become the smartest thing in every conceivable universe. Young Rick refuses because he'd rather spend time with his wife Diane and daughter Beth, eating ice cream like a functional human being. Shocking character development for Rick, honestly. Rick Prime gets mad, leaves, and then a bomb falls through a portal, killing Diane and Beth in an explosion. Young Rick becomes consumed by grief and revenge, creates the portal gun, and spends decades hunting the Rick who killed his family. Except none of that happened, or maybe it did, we don't know. Rick reveals the whole thing was fabricated, a fake memory designed to trick the interrogator into downloading what he thought was the portal gun formula, but was actually a virus, giving Rick control of the brainalyzer. The entire tragic backstory was bait in the most elaborate social engineering hack ever pulled. Kevin Mitnick would be proud if he watched cartoons about drunk scientists. Rick literally weaponized his own trauma, real or imagined, to escape an unescapable prison. Here's where it gets properly haunting. We have no idea what's actually true about Rick's past. Did Diane exist? Did she die? Was there ever a Beth who got killed? Rick admits at the end of the episode that he's not driven by avenging his dead family because that was fake, but he could also be lying about it being fake to manipulate Morty, because Rick lies about everything, including whether he's lying. The show's been playing with this ambiguity ever since some episodes suggest Diane was real. Others imply Rick's just a bastard who abandoned his family for science. We're stuck in this Schrodinger's backstory situation where Rick's trauma both exists and doesn't exist until the writers decide to collapse the waveform, and knowing this show, they probably never will because ambiguity is funnier. The Shoney's itself represents something darker than just a fake memory. Rick chose it as his mental safe space, this corporate chain restaurant with sticky tables and mediocre pancakes, because it's safe, so comfortable, so Shoney's. For someone as brilliant and chaotic as Rick, his happy place isn't some idealized version of his garage or a perfect memory with his family. It's an aggressively average American restaurant that serves breakfast all day. That's either the saddest thing ever or the most relatable thing the show's ever done, depending on how much you relate to using chain restaurants as emotional crutches. No judgment. We've all had a 2 a.m. Denny's moment. The episode ends with Rick revealing his real motivation is finding McDonald's Szechuan sauce from the 1998 Mulan promotion, which he tried in the fake memory, claiming, "That's my series arc. Morty, that's my one-armed man." This is either Rick deflecting from real emotional vulnerability with absurdist humor, or it's exactly as stupid as it sounds, and Rick genuinely cares more about discontinued condiments than human connection. Knowing Rick, it's probably both simultaneously, which is the most Rick thing possible. Some haunted dimensions are full of ghosts. This one's full of question marks about whether anything Rick says about his past is real, and a family restaurant that may or may not represent the only stable thing left in his fractured psyche. That's just what happens when you can't trust your own memories, because you've weaponized them too many times to remember which ones were real to begin with. Now let's talk about the next universe. The story train meta prison. Rick and Morty got trapped on a train made of storytelling itself, and the only way to escape was to convert to Christianity, ironically. This is what happens when community creator Dan Harmon decides to make an episode that's basically a passive-aggressive lecture about narrative structure disguised as a Rick and Morty adventure. And honestly, kind of respect the audacity. The whole meta-nightmare kicks off in Never Ricking Morty, episode 6 of season 4, where Rick and Morty wake up on a space train with no memory of how they got there. Every passenger is obsessed with Rick Sanchez. They're all either trying to kill him or dated him, which the show treats as equally traumatic. Fair. The train keeps looping back on itself in a circle. Each car contains a different genre vignette about Rick, and there's a ripped tickets guy who won't stop asking for tickets while looking like an Abercrombie model. Morty calls him cum gutters personified, which is disgusting but anatomically accurate. Rick figures out pretty quickly that they're trapped inside a literal literary device, quite literally, metaphorically containing us, which is the kind of sentence that makes English teachers either very excited or very angry, no in between. The train is an anthology, a story structure that's become sentient and is forcing them to participate in narrative beats, whether they want to or not. Every car represents a different story trope: Christmas specials, origin stories, training montages, bottle episodes. They can't find the engine because there is no engine, it's pure structure all the way down, like if M.C. Escher designed a screenwriting textbook and then made it into a prison. The villain is Story Lord, who looks like if Fraser Crane became a buff space wizard and developed strong opinions about the hero's journey. He's kidnapped Rick and Morty to fuel his anthology train with their limitless potential, planning to propel it beyond the fifth wall, because apparently breaking the fourth wall is pedestrian. Now, we're doing fifth wall breaks, like this is some kind of meta-arms race. Storylord is basically every pretentious film student who won't shut up about Joseph Campbell's monomyth, except he's got actual magic powers and uses them to trap people in narrative structure. He calls Rick out for spiraling through the multiverse burping semi-improvised dialogue about how nothing matters, which is both a sick burn and an accurate description of like 60% of the show. Rick and Morty try to escape by breaking narrative conventions. Morty attempts to tell a story unrelated to them about a guy named Mike Johnson and scorpions. It's terrible. Rick forces Morty to pass the Bechdel test by improvising a story about Beth and Summer, talking about their periods and fighting female scorpions, which somehow works. The show is very aware of how stupid this sounds. Eventually, they're saved by converting to Christianity. They literally accept Jesus Christ as their personal savior in a scene so earnest and awful that it breaks the anthology's structure because nobody ever wanted to see that shit. Storylord gets trapped in the Bible for eternity, which Rick describes as every writer's hell. The real horror of this dimension is Floaty Bloodman, a guy torn in half and suspended between train cars, slowly dying while living out an alternative non-diegetic reality. He's literally suspended in disbelief, get it? Because suspension of disbelief is a narrative concept, the episode won't let you miss these jokes. He's aware he's dying but trapped in a time-dilated fantasy, and some people worship him as a god, while others think keeping him alive through celibacy will preserve the universe. He's basically what happens when you become a plot device instead of a character, and he's in constant agony because of it. The episode ends with the ultimate meta-commentary, Rick trying to sell Morty more Story Train merchandise from the Citadel gift shop, explaining that Morty's only purpose in life is to buy and consume merchandise. The whole episode was about a toy train Morty bought that derailed itself, and Rick's response is to tell him to buy another one because not buying it is an act of buying it. The Story Train is allegedly a real product you can buy at www.story-train.com. Don't. Check. It's probably a virus, or a Rickroll, or both. Some haunted dimensions are full of ghosts. This one's haunted by the prison of narrative structure itself. The idea that characters exist to serve plot, that stories must follow rules, that everything needs a beginning, middle, and end. Storylord wanted to trap Rick and Morty in perfect storytelling forever, but they escaped by making the worst story possible. That's just what happens when you realize you're a character in someone else's narrative, and the only way out is to make it so bad they have to cancel you. Up next is the Truth Tortoise's domain. Rick and Morty stole a crystal-covered tortoise that contains all knowledge in the universe. Morty looked directly into its eyes like an idiot, and the resulting existential breakdown was so catastrophic that Rick had to memory wipe him just so he could function. This is what happens when you ignore very specific instructions about not making eye contact with cosmic truth creatures. Basically, the ultimate don't feed the animals sign, except the animal feeds you. Information that breaks your brain. The whole truth-induced nightmare goes down at the start of Mort Dinner Rick Andre, episode 1 of season 5, where Rick and Morty are running through an M.C. Escher fever dream dimension being chased by some goth-looking creature screaming, "Return the truth, tortoise." They're carrying this tortoise covered in crystals, and Rick's giving Morty very clear instructions. Don't drop it, and whatever you do, don't look into its eyes. Morty, being Morty, immediately admits, I did look at it, Rick. I've been looking at it. Which is like telling your friend, don't press the red button, and they respond, oh, I've been pressing it this whole time. Why? Rick's response is perfect. Now you're gonna know everything, Morty. Good job. Way to go. You fucked everything up. The truth tortoise doesn't just know facts or trivia, it knows everything. The complete, unfiltered truth of all existence. Every answer to every question. The meaning of life, the nature of reality, why we're here, where we're going, probably also why hot dogs come in packs of 10, but buns come in packs of 8, the real questions. And apparently this knowledge is so devastating that the human brain just can't handle it without immediately shutting down like a laptop running Cyberpunk 2077 on medium settings. Morty starts hearing the tortoise's speech in his head and screams, "It's in my head! Ooh!" Then he throws the truth tortoise down a pink vortex before the goth creature can get it back, and the entire dimension starts collapsing from its foundations, which seems like an extreme reaction, but I guess when you yeet ultimate truth into a void, reality gets mad about it. They escape, but when they get home, Morty's absolutely destroyed. He tells Rick, I can't go on like this with the truth tortoise shit in my head, which is probably the most relatable thing Morty's ever said. We've all had thoughts that made us want a hard reset, but most of us don't have access to alien memory erasing technology. Rick casually offers to erase the memory from Morty's mind, then reveals he has an entire underground archive full of traumatic memories he's removed from Morty over the years. This becomes a whole thing in Morty's mind blowers, but that's a different haunted dimension. The truth tortoise memory gets labeled and stored away with all the other psychological casualties, and Morty goes back to normal like nothing happened. Problem solved. Rick Sanchez style don't process trauma, just delete it and pretend it never existed. Truly the healthiest coping mechanism. Here's what makes the truth tortoise's domain properly haunting. It's an M.C. Escher-style reality where geometry doesn't make sense, and some creature guards this tortoise that knows literally everything. The tortoise just exists there, carrying the weight of infinite knowledge, probably aware that anyone who looks at it will immediately regret it, but unable to do anything about it. It's like being cursed with perfect knowledge. You know the answers to everything, but the answers are so terrible that they destroy anyone who hears them. The tortoise is basically a walking spoiler for existence itself. The goth creature chasing them seems desperate to get the tortoise back, understandably, since they just stole cosmic truth and yeeted it into a vortex. When the dimension collapses after Morty throws the tortoise away, it raises questions. Was that dimension held together by the tortoise's knowledge? Did destroying or displacing ultimate truth cause reality itself to break down? Is the truth tortoise still out there in that pink vortex, knowing everything, including the fact that it's trapped in a void? These are the kinds of questions that probably drove Morty insane in the first place. Some haunted dimensions are full of ghosts. This one's haunted by a crystalline turtle that knows every answer you'd ever want to ask. And the catch is that actually learning those answers will psychologically obliterate you. That's just what happens when you realize some questions are better left unanswered, and some truths are literally unknowable without losing your mind. The truth tortoise doesn't kill you. It just shows you reality so clearly that you can't function anymore, which is arguably worse than death. At least death is simple. Ultimate truth is complicated and makes you wish you were dead, which is why Rick keeps a memory eraser handy. Shifting hearts to the talking cat's origin, and remember to subscribe for more videos like these. The talking cat's origin. Redacted. A talking cat showed up at the Smith house asking Jerry to take him to Florida. Rick scanned its brain to find out why it could talk, and what he saw made him immediately vomit and offer to erase both their memories. The show never reveals what the cat did or witnessed, and that's somehow worse than any answer they could have given. This is like if Garfield committed war crimes, but we only see the aftermath, not the lasagna-scented atrocities themselves. The whole cursed mystery kicks off in Claw and Hoarder, Special Rick Tim's Morty, Episode 4 of Season 4, the Dragon Psychology episode, but we're focusing on the B-plot because the A-plot is somehow less disturbing. A regular-looking orange cat appears in Jerry's bedroom and starts talking. not like meow translated into English full human speech, asking Jerry to take them to the airport for 2 first-class tickets to Florida. Jerry naturally asks why the cat can talk, and the cat hits him with, "Why should that matter? Maybe it's time you stopped asking questions and started having fun." This is textbook grooming behavior, except instead of candy in a van, it's Florida vacation vibes and aggressive anti-intellectualism, which, to be fair, is very on brand for Florida. Jerry falls for it immediately because Jerry's whole personality is guy who makes bad decisions. And they head to Florida, where they play beach volleyball with a guy named Jipe who has a yacht. Everything's going great until someone finds cat shit buried in the sand and the beach people exile them for asking too many questions. Florida truly is America's Australia, when you think about it. Eventually, Rick finds Jerry and the cat at a gas station. Rick's suspicious, because talking cats don't just happen. This isn't a DreamWorks movie. There's gotta be an explanation. The cat keeps insisting, "I'm from outer space, happy?" But Rick knows that's deflection. So Rick busts out his mind-scanning device, and here's where everything goes sideways, into nightmare territory. The transcript literally just shows explosions in the background of whatever Rick's seeing, then cuts to Rick saying, "Oh, son of a bitch," and both him and Jerry crying hysterically. We never see what the cat did. The show deliberately doesn't show us. Rick, who has destroyed civilizations, killed thousands, seen every horrible thing the multiverse has to offer, and turned himself into a pickle to avoid therapy, is traumatized so badly, he immediately offers to erase their memories. Jerry, who initially wanted to remember because someone has to remember, agrees to the memory wipe within like 10 seconds. That's how bad it was. Jerry, "I went to Pluto and believed everything they told me." Smith looked into the void and said, "Nah, I'm good. Delete that shit." After the memory wipe, Jerry acts like the cat was just a normal alien. He's from outer space, that little, of course, total mindfuck, but in a dismissive way, like it wasn't that serious. The cat escapes, and at the end of the episode, when a dragon asks why he can speak, the cat says, "I'm ashamed of it," and the dragon responds, "Then speak of it no more." Even the dragon, who just got out of a soul orgy that killed a wizard, respects that some backstories are too cursed to unpack. Here's what makes this dimension properly haunting. The horror isn't what the cat did, it's that we'll never know. The show created a mystery box so terrible that even Rick Sanchez wanted to forget he opened it. Did the cat commit genocide? Was it complicit in something worse? Did it witness something so cosmically horrible that just being near the memory of it breaks your brain? We don't know. We'll never know. The writers specifically chose not to tell us because whatever you're imagining is probably worse than anything they could write. Some haunted dimensions are full of monsters you can fight. This one's haunted by a regular-looking cat with a secret so terrible that the smartest man in the universe chose ignorance over knowledge. That's just what happens when you realize some questions don't have answers you can survive knowing. The cat's still out there, probably in Florida, still talking, still smiling, still carrying whatever unspeakable truth made Rick Sanchez cry. And we're all better off not knowing what that truth is, which is the most Lovecraftian thing this show's ever done without actually doing Lovecraft. Let's move to our next universe, the Death Crystal timelines. Morty found a crystal that shows him every possible way he could die, got addicted to one specific future where Jessica holds him as he dies old, and proceeded to accidentally kill thousands of people trying to stay on that timeline. This is what happens when you give a 14-year-old boy access to quantum destiny algorithms and zero adult supervision. Though, to be fair, Rick's version of adult supervision is, here's how I use these to win bar fights, so maybe less supervision was actually better. The whole timeline addiction nightmare kicks off in Edge of Tomorty, Rick Die Rick Pete, episode 1 of season 4, where Rick takes Morty to Forbodulon Prime to steal death crystals from alien poachers. The irony of Rick calling other people thieves while actively stealing is not lost on anyone. Death crystals show you how you're going to die based on your current choices. Your future stems from your present, so if you're living right, it keeps changing. Rick uses them to predict when enemies will reload their guns during firefights, which is both genius and the most Rick Sanchez application of fate-seeing technology possible. Why use cosmic knowledge for enlightenment when you can use it for murder efficiency? D. Morty grabs a crystal and immediately sees a future where he dies old, with Jessica holding him saying, "I love you, Morty." This vision hits him so hard, he becomes instantly addicated to following the crystal's guidance to reach that specific death. Problem is, the crystal shows him billions of possible deaths across infinite timelines, and staying on the Jessica death path requires making very specific choices every single second. So Morty starts driving the spaceship based entirely on what keeps him on track to die with Jessica, which immediately leads to him crashing and killing Rick. Oos. Here's where things get properly cursed. Rick has a hologram backup in Morty's spine that activates when he dies, plus a clone protocol that keeps resurrecting him in different dimensions. Every time Morty kills Rick, which happens a lot, Rick respawns somewhere else, first in a fascist dystopia dimension, then a wasp dimension, then other increasingly weird realities. The fascist dimension Rick is exactly what it sounds like. The show doesn't shy away from this. And Wasp Rick lives in a reality where his family are literal wasps, who eat their prey alive and lay eggs in eyeballs. Wasp Rick actually seems pretty chill about it because, when you're born that big an asshole, the least you can do is have a little empathy, weirdly profound, coming from a wasp person eating screaming food. Meanwhile, Morty's following the crystal so hard he becomes basically invincible. Anyone who tries to stop him instantly dies because killing him would take him off the Jessica death timeline. He touches a bully, and the kid explodes into ash. He touches cops, and they die. He accidentally creates an Akira-style situation where he absorbs so many bodies he turns into a giant screaming flesh blob destroying the city. The news describes it as an unstoppable science fiction boy attacking our nation's final line of defense, which is technically accurate. At one point, he goes to court for killing 80-something people, and the judge lets him go because his garbled death crystal-guided speech accidentally matches her dead husband's last words. Galaxy brain courtroom strategy. Just speak nonsense and hope it's someone's dying relative's catchphrase. The real kicker? When Jessica actually approaches Morty and asks him to go skinny dipping, he turns her down because the crystal shows they get together in their 40s instead. He's so addicted to one specific future with her that he rejects the actual present with her. That's the real horror of knowing your future. You stop living in it. You become a puppet dancing on strings you made yourself, murdering your way toward a destiny you saw in a rock. The episode ends with Morty learning to live in the moment, but also think ahead, which is the least helpful lesson possible. So, basically split the difference between planning everything and planning nothing. Got it. Super useful. The death crystals are still out there on Forbodulon Prime, showing infinite possible deaths to anyone dumb enough to look. Rick was right about one thing. People who spend their life avoiding death are already dead. Morty spent an entire day trying to control exactly how he'd die and nearly destroyed civilization in the process. Turns out the scariest thing about seeing your future is realizing you'll destroy your present, trying to reach it. Moving ahead to the pizza universe. In the same episode, Edge of Tomerty, Rick Die Rick Pete. One of the dimensions Rick respawns in has pizzas ordering humans for delivery, and the show treats this as a throwaway sight gag. But let's sit with that horror for a second. In that reality, the entire predator-prey relationship is inverted. Humans are the product. We're not the consumers. We're what gets consumed. And this isn't slavery or dystopia. It's just how their reality works. Pizzas are sentient. Humans are food. The fundamental hierarchy of consciousness and consumption got flipped. And somewhere in the multiverse right now there's a pizza complaining their human arrived cold. The pizza universe appears for maybe 3 seconds during Rick's dimension-hopping death montage in Edge of Tomerty. Rick Die Rick Pete. Fascist Rick dies and respawns as Pizza Rick. I'm calling him that. The show doesn't name him. We see him in a pizza restaurant, except the restaurant is from the pizza's perspective. A pizza sits at a table. Another pizza walks up holding a thermal delivery bag. The bag opens. Inside is a human. Our Rick. The customer pizza presumably takes the human product home to eat him. Rick dies again and respawns somewhere else. The whole thing lasts seconds. Nobody comments on it. Moving on. Except hold up. Let's think about the logistics. If pizzas order humans, that means humans are farmed, which means there's human ranches where pizzas raise humans for slaughter, like we raise cattle. There's probably free-range humans versus factory-farmed humans. The free-range ones get to roam around, thinking they're people, before they're harvested at peak tenderness. There's possibly a whole human rights debate where progressive pizzas argue humans might be sentient, and conservative pizzas respond, if humans didn't want to be eaten, why are they made of meat? The really cursed part? This isn't a unique dimension. This is just one example of inverted power dynamics in infinite realities. For every universe where humans are apex predators, there's infinite universes where we're prey, infinite universes where we're livestock, infinite universes where we're considered a delicacy, probably marketed like ethically sourced, artisanal human, grass-fed, and hormone-free. The multiverse doesn't care about your position in the food chain. You're simultaneously predator and prey across infinite realities, and the only difference is which version of you is reading this sentence versus getting served on a plate. And it's not just pizzas. There could be universes where chairs eat humans, revenge for all that sitting. Universes where gravity is sentient and considers falling humans a snack. Universes where the concept of Tuesday developed consciousness and now feeds on people who don't like Taco Tuesday, which is most of them, let's be honest. If consciousness can emerge from anything in infinite realities, then anything can be the consumer and you can be the consumed. Here's the philosophical nightmare. In the pizza universe, humans probably don't even know their food until they're being eaten. They're probably raised in human farms thinking they're living normal lives, getting fattened up on whatever humans eat in that dimension, probably still pizza, which adds a whole cannibalism by proxy layer to this. They go about their day, maybe fall in love, have aspirations, worry about their future. Then one day a pizza farmer shows up like, time for delivery, and that's it. Your whole existence was just inventory. The multiverse is infinite, which means every possible arrangement of matter and consciousness exists somewhere. Which means there's not just one pizza universe, there's infinite variations. Pizza universe, but humans are the delivery drivers. Pizza universe, but humans and pizzas are equals, probably some uncomfortable interspecies romance there. Pizza universe, but the pizzas feel really guilty about eating humans, and they're trying to develop synthetic human meat substitutes, beyond human. Pizza universe, where humans domesticated pizzas first, and we're having the same conversation but reversed. That universe is still running, still functioning. Right now, in that dimension, a pizza is probably complaining their human got delivered to the wrong address, and customer service pizza is apologizing and offering a replacement human. The cycle continues. And somewhere across infinite realities, there's a version of you that's not reading about the pizza universe. They're in it, living as livestock, completely unaware they exist solely as someone else's dinner. Sleep tight. Let's continue on with the nested simulation prison. Rick got trapped in a simulation inside another simulation, tricked aliens into blowing themselves up with a fake recipe for rocket fuel, and spent the rest of the episode paranoid that maybe he's still inside one of the simulations. This is what happens when the galaxy's least successful con artists decide to scam the smartest man in the universe, using technology they barely understand. The whole nested reality nightmare kicks off in M. Night Shyamalan Aliens, Episode 4 of Season 1, where Rick wakes up and immediately knows something's wrong because the details are sloppy. There's a guy putting a bun between two hot dogs instead of a hot dog in a bun. A Pop-Tart drives out of a toaster house in a toaster car, raising the obvious question, why would a Pop-Tart want to live inside the scariest possible place for them to exist? Rick figures out they're inside a massive simulation chamber on a Zagarian spacecraft, aliens trying to steal his formula for concentrated dark matter, the fuel for faster-than-light travel. The Zagarians are described as the galaxy's most ambitious, least successful con artists, and you can tell because their simulation has the production value of a student film. Beth acts like a malfunctioning Roomba, robotically saying, "I am going to work, goodbye." At school, Morty gets asked to teach the class after answering that 5 times 9 is at least 40, which the teacher calls exactly correct. Jessica immediately offers to be Morty's girlfriend if he reveals Rick's scientific secrets, which should have been the biggest red flag, but Morty's too horny to notice. When Rick needs to communicate freely with Morty, they strip naked and get in a shower together, because the Zagarians are really uncomfortable with nudity and won't monitor them there. The aliens literally groan and look away from their monitors going, "Oh God, sir, they're still naked." One alien suggests making Kevin look instead, and Kevin immediately protests. Kevin's going to have a rough day. Meanwhile, Jerry got accidentally sucked into the simulation and is having the best day of his life. He pitches, "Hungry for apples?" to apple farmers. It's just, got milk? But worse. Everyone loves it. He wins an award called an Appley and has the best sex of his life with simulation Beth. The simulation's so low res in his sector that when he walks down the street, he passes the same 3 people on loop. A mailman saying, "My man," an old guy saying, "Slow down," and a woman saying, "Looking good." Jerry doesn't notice because Jerry's entire personality is not noticing things. He turns on the radio and hears Earth radio, and now hears human music followed by repetitive beeping. His reaction? Human music. I like it. Here's where things get properly cursed. Rick figures out they're in a simulation and escapes to what looks like the real spaceship. He and Morty steal processing chips from the Zagarian's central computer, get in an escape pod, fly back to Earth, and enter Rick's garage. Rick even says, "Totes malotes, dog," because he thinks he won. Then the simulation breaks down. Again, they were inside a second simulation the whole time. Prince Nebulon reveals they made Rick think he escaped so he'd enter his safe's code. Rick points out he can just go home and change the code, so Nebulon responds, "That is why you're never getting home." Rick and Morty escape naked again. It's the only defense that works. Steal another ship, and need concentrated dark matter to power it. Conveniently, all the ingredients are just sitting in the engine room. Rick tells Morty the recipe: 2 parts plutonic quarks, 1 part cesium, pour in the water. Morty freezes up mid-pour. The simulation breaks down a third time. They were in a simulation within a simulation within another giant simulation. Prince Nebulon gloats that they finally have the recipe, and also casually mentions that Kevin fought real hard to supervise the project of simulating Morty's genitals. Kevin immediately yells, "You said you weren't going to tell anyone." Rick acts defeated and leaves. The Zagarians celebrate by immediately making concentrated dark matter using Rick's recipe. Prince Nebulon gets emotional, apologizes for yelling earlier, tells everyone he loves them and their families. He pours in the final ingredient, water, and their entire spacecraft explodes. Rick gave them a bomb recipe, disguised as rocket fuel. Every single Zagarian dies screaming in space because they trusted the smartest man in the universe after torturing him with nested simulations for hours. Back on Earth, Jerry pitches, "Hungry for apples?" in actual reality, and immediately gets fired. His boss asks, "How does a guy like that go home and have sex with his wife?" The episode ends with drunk Rick stumbling into Morty's bedroom at night, getting weirdly emotional. "You're a good kid, Morty." Then suddenly holding a knife to Morty's throat, screaming, "Are you a simulation?" before apologizing and passing out. Rick's so traumatized by the nested simulations that he can't trust reality anymore. 3 layers deep was enough to break his ability to distinguish real from fake, and now he's stuck in permanent paranoid uncertainty. The Zagarians are dead, exploded into space dust, but Rick lost something worse. He lost his confidence that anything around him is actually real. And somewhere in the multiverse, there might be simulated Ricks, still trapped in those nested layers, living fake lives inside fake worlds, never knowing they died when the ship exploded. The only certainty is that Kevin definitely simulated Morty's junk, and everyone knows about it now. Let's taking things over to Roy, a life well lived. Morty put on a VR headset at an alien arcade and lived 55 years as a guy named Roy who survived cancer, only to die falling off a ladder at a carpet store. And when he woke up, his first question was, "Where's my wife?" This is either the darkest thing Rick and Morty ever did, or just a regular Tuesday at Blips and Chits, the galaxy's most popular arcade, where you can experience an entire human lifetime for the price of some flurbos and your sanity. The whole existential nightmare goes down in Morty Night Run, episode 2 of season 2, where Rick takes Morty to Blips and Chits after selling an antimatter gun to an assassin, Different Crisis. We're focusing on the simulation horror. Rick slaps a helmet on Morty's head, and suddenly Morty is Roy Parsons, waking up as a kid from a nightmare about an old man putting a helmet on him, which is actually the real memory bleeding through. But Kid Roy dismisses it as a fever dream because the human brain will do anything to make reality make sense. Roy grows up. He plays high school football and makes eye contact with a girl in the stands during a touchdown. They get married. They have a kid. His wife suggests he talk to her father about getting a job at the carpet store, which Roy clearly doesn't want, but does anyway, because that's what responsible adults do. They compromise their dreams for economic stability. The game's simulation of crushing disappointment is apparently very accurate. Then Roy gets cancer. The doctor tells him they should have caught it sooner, which is the medical equivalent of shoulda bought the extended warranty. Roy survives surgery, and there's a banner at his house that says, "Cancer can't beat the Rocket," his high school football nickname, showing how identity gets frozen at our peak moment, and we spend the rest of our lives living in its shadow. Years pass. Roy's older, graying, wearing glasses, working at the carpet store. A customer thanks him for the carpet. Roy sits down and looks at a trophy that says, "World's Greatest Dad," having one of those rare quiet moments where life feels okay. Then someone yells from off-screen asking if he pulled the Persian off-white shags for the clearance sale. Roy climbs a small ladder to get the rugs, loses his balance, and dies. Game over. 55 years, gone. The screen literally says, "Game over," like Roy's entire existence was just a session of Pac-Man. Morty rips off the helmet, absolutely traumatized, screaming, "Where's my wife?" And Rick's response is, "You beat cancer and went back to work at the carpet store? Boo." Rick's disappointed that Morty lived such a boring life, completely missing that Morty just experienced 55 years of memories, emotions, relationships. He had a wife, a kid, he survived cancer. Those decades feel real to him. The wife he's asking about never existed outside the simulation, but Morty's brain doesn't know that. His neurons firing, "I love this person, don't care whether that person is made of atoms or code." Here's the properly haunting part. Roy is a popular game. When Rick sits down to play, other aliens gather around to watch. One alien gets excited because this guy's taking Roy off the grid. This guy doesn't have a social security number for Roy. Like there's a whole meta game of trying to live as Roy in unconventional ways, which means thousands, maybe millions of beings play Roy regularly, which means there are potentially millions of Roy consciousnesses living and dying on repeat, each one convinced they're the real Roy Parsons, until the moment they hit the ground at the carpet store and cease to exist. But do they cease to exist? When Morty takes off the helmet, does Roy's consciousness just stop? Or is there some fragment left in the machine, aware it's trapped, doomed to reset and replay the same life over and over? The game clearly has continuity. Roy's memories persist throughout his lifetime. So what happens in the gaps between players? Is there a Roy sitting in darkness, waiting for the next person to put on the helmet so he can wake up as a kid again, have the same nightmare, marry the same woman, get the same cancer, die the same death? Morty's experience suggests the memories linger even after the game ends. He's disoriented, asking about his wife, needing Rick to remind him, "You were just playing a game, it's called Roy, snap out of it." If the player retains the memories even briefly, what about Roy himself? And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Roy has that nightmare as a kid about an old man putting a helmet on him. Kid Roy dismisses it as fever dreams, but it's actually a memory of the real reality bleeding through, which means Roy might be semi-aware he's in a simulation, might have these flashes of, "This isn't real," but his programmed consciousness rationalizes them away because acknowledging the truth would be too devastating. Rick puts on the helmet to beat Morty's score, and the last we see of him playing, he's taking Roy off the grid, no social security number, living completely outside the system. The game continues existing. Roy 2 eventually comes out, mentioned in a commercial at the end. Somewhere in the Blips and Chits network, there are infinite Roys living full lives, loving their families, surviving cancer, dying at carpet stores, over and over forever. And maybe, just maybe, every single one of them knows, on some deep level they can't quite access, that they're trapped in a loop they can never escape. Fart's dimension, carbon-based genocide. A telepathic gas cloud can transmute matter, sing David Bowie songs, and considers all solid life forms a disease requiring extermination. Morty murdered an assassin to save him, helped him escape across the galaxy, while bonding over musical numbers about cosmic peace, then had to shoot him at the wormhole home because Fart casually mentioned he was heading back to organize a cleansing of Earth. Somewhere in another dimension right now, Fart's entire species is searching for carbon-based planets to sterilize. They're the universe's immune system, and you're the infection. This happens in the same episode in Morty Jr. Run as Roy, after Morty's already traumatized from living 55 years in a VR helmet. Rick sold an antimatter gun to Crombopulos Michael, a cheerful assassin who hands Morty his business card while explaining, "I have no code of ethics. I will kill anyone, anywhere. Children, animals, old people, doesn't matter. I just love killin'." Morty's horrified. Rick's like, "Yeah, but now we can go to Blips and Chits priority." While Rick's playing Roy, Morty looks at Michael's business card, sees his location, and decides to stop the murder. Morty crashes Rick's ship through a government facility ceiling, crushing Crombopulos Michael to death. He immediately regrets this. "What have I done?" Until he sees what Michael was about to kill, a strange gaseous being imprisoned by the Galactic Federation. The gas cloud introduces himself through telepathy, though he initially says Jessica's feet instead of telepathy. Morty's crush is apparently louder in his mind than the concept of mind reading. Morty asks his name. The cloud says, "My kind has no use for names but likes the name Morty gives him, Fart." Fart needs to get home through a wormhole in the Promethean Nebula. Rick wants to kill him. Morty insists on helping. This kicks off a chase across Gear World, where Fart demonstrates his abilities. He can transmute elements, turns oxygen into gold by adding 71 protons to it. Rick immediately realizes this makes Fart galaxy-endingly dangerous. Any species that gets a hold of this thing is going to use it to take over the galaxy. But Morty's committed to being the hero. During the chase, Fart uses telepathy as a weapon. He enters a Gear police officer's mind and makes him paranoid about whether his friend Greg is sleeping with his girlfriend. Fart literally plants the image in his head. The officer has a complete breakdown, screams "My life is a fucking joke," and crashes his cruiser, setting off a chain reaction that destroys dozens of police vehicles and kills civilians. Fart floats back into the car and says, "All right, let's proceed," like he didn't just cause a mass casualty event. Rick and Morty are both horrified, but for different reasons. Rick, because it proves Fart's dangerous. Morty, because his good deed is racking up a body count. The whole trip, Fart keeps validating Morty's hero complex. You are not like other carbon-based life forms. You put the value of all life above your own. At one point, Fart envelops Morty and sings "Goodbye, Moonmen," this weirdly beautiful David Bowie-style song about cosmic unity and a world without hatred, set to a montage from Morty's imagination, showing peaceful civilizations and stars. Morty's completely buying into the "we're saving a wise alien" narrative. They reach the wormhole. Morty's getting emotional saying goodbye. Fart says, "I will be back soon, Morty." Morty thinks Fart wants to visit, gets excited. Then Fart clarifies, "After I return to the others with this location, we will be back for your cleansing." Morty's confused. Fart explains matter-of-factly, "Carbon-based life is a threat to all higher life. To us, you are what you would call a disease. Wherever we discover you, we cure it. You said yourself that life must be protected even through sacrifice." Fart can read Morty's thoughts, knows Morty's devastated, but doesn't care because, from his perspective, this is just pest control. Morty asks Fart to sing one more time. Fart approaches singing about cosmos without hatred and quasars shining through endless night. Morty shoots him mid-verse with the antimatter gun. Fart asks, "Why?" as he disintegrates. Morty shoots him several more times crying, then drops the gun and says, "Goodbye." Fart's species is still out there, still searching for carbon-based life to cleanse. They genuinely believe they're heroes purifying the universe. That dimension doesn't want to conquer you or eat you, it wants to sterilize you like mold in a bathroom. Your existence is the contamination. Now to the next part. Fruppyland, the feral child dimension. Rick made Beth a pocket dimension where she could play safely. Beth trapped her childhood friend Tommy inside it and forgot about him for 30 years. And Tommy survived by fucking imaginary creatures to create hybrid offspring that he then ate in an endless cycle of cannibalistic incest. This is what happens when you combine Rick Sanchez's parenting philosophy, give your kid their own universe instead of an iPad, with Beth's sociopathic tendencies, genetic, apparently, and a complete lack of adult supervision, also genetic. The whole nightmare kicks off in The ABCs of Beth, episode 9 of season 3, when Beth sees a news report about Joseph Eli Lipnip, a guy who ate his own son, getting executed. The murdered kid was Beth's childhood friend Tommy, except Beth tells Summer she just convinced herself as a kid that Tommy had gotten lost in the magical realm of Fruppyland. Instead of processing the trauma like a normal person, turns out both things were true, which is somehow worse. Rick immediately gets defensive because apparently Fruppyland was his creation, a pocket dimension he made for Beth to play in when she was a kid, and he's mad she's been shit-talking the name for years. Rick opens a portal to Fruppyland, and they discover it's still there. Procedurally generated clouds, a rainbow river, literally a river made of rainbow, bouncy ground, breathable water. Everything's designed to be completely childproof because Rick actually put effort into making sure Beth couldn't hurt herself. The creatures were designed to be harmless. It's basically if Candyland became a functional ecosystem, which should have been impossible, except Rick's a genius, and also, apparently terrible at predicting second-order consequences, a running theme. Beth and Rick find out pretty quickly that something went wrong when a giant grotesque bird with razor-sharp claws attacks Rick and rips his arm off. This thing was not designed by Rick. It's a hybrid creature, mixing Fruppyland procedural carbons with real human DNA. Rick figures out what happened. Tommy survived in Fruppyland by having sex with the harmless imaginary creatures, creating hybrid offspring with enough biological material to actually eat, then consuming them for protein, rinse and repeat for 3 decades. Beth literally spells it out. Are you saying Tommy survived here by having sex with Fruppy creatures, creating Fruppy human hybrid offspring, and then consuming their proteins, sustaining himself with an endless cycle of cannibalistic incest? And Rick's like, it's just a working theory, as if that makes it better. Turns out the theory's correct. Tommy's still alive, worshipped as a god-king by a medieval-level society of his least delicious children, meaning he ate the tasty ones and kept the gross ones around for breeding stock and worship, which is the most dystopian eugenics program ever conceived. When Fruppy soldiers capture Rick and Beth, they announce Tommy as our exalted ruler, giver and taker of life, humper and consumer of mortality, which is technically accurate, but sounds like something you'd read on a Crusader Kings 3 loading screen after your dynasty goes full Habsburg. The kicker? Beth trapped Tommy there in the first place. When they were kids, Beth locked him in Fruppyland and just left. Then she either forgot or deliberately repressed the memory, letting everyone think he'd been kidnapped and murdered while she knew he was actually trapped in an inescapable pocket dimension with no food, no people, and no way out. Tommy spent 30 years alone in a children's playground, slowly descending into feral madness, creating an empire of incest babies just to survive. Meanwhile, Beth went to therapy to process the trauma of losing her friend, which is like going to therapy for arson damage on a house you personally set on fire. When adult Beth meets King Tommy, the transcript cuts off before showing the full confrontation, but context clues suggest it goes badly. She's facing the consequences of childhood sociopathy that her dad enabled by giving her access to interdimensional prison technology at age 7. Rick's defense is that he made the place safe, which is technically true. Beth couldn't hurt herself there. But he didn't account for Beth trapping other children inside, or what would happen if someone actually got stuck there long term. It's the ultimate tiger parent fail. I gave you your own world instead of an iPad. Yeah, Rick. And she used it to create a Lord of the Flies situation with extra incest. The episode's basically asking, what happens to the kids we abandon? Tommy became a cannibalistic god king because a child trapped him in a fantasy world and forgot about him. Every hybrid creature in Fruppyland is technically Tommy's descendant, created through desperation and eaten for survival. That's what happens when you leave someone in solitary confinement with only procedurally generated clouds for company. Tommy didn't go crazy because the dimension was dangerous. He went crazy because he was 7 years old and got abandoned in paradise, with nobody to talk to except the voices in his head, which eventually became his children. Food source, full circle. Rick created Fruppyland to keep Beth safe from the universe. Beth used Fruppyland to trap Tommy and erase him from her life. Tommy used Fruppyland's resources to create a sustainable protein source through the power of disturbing reproductive choices. And somewhere in that dimension right now, there's a whole civilization of Fruppy human hybrids living under a medieval government, unaware that their god king is just a traumatized kid from Earth who got really good at survival cannibalism. That dimension's still running, the door still works, and Tommy's probably still in there, unless Beth killed him, which honestly would be a mercy at this point, but the transcript cuts off, so we don't know. Either way, the toys Rick made for his daughter's playtime became sentient through sexual reproduction, and then got eaten by their own father-creator. That's like if Toy Story ended with Woody eating Buzz Lightyear's children to survive the apocalypse Andy accidentally created by forgetting them in the attic. Time to check out the Citadel of Ricks. Rick and Morty went to Atlantis while the Citadel of Ricks elected evil Morty as president. But the real horror was Simple Rick, a guy who loved his daughter so much that they trapped him in a neural loop, forced him to relive her birthday party forever, and harvested the joy chemicals from his brain to sell as cookie flavoring. This is what happens when capitalism meets neuroscience, meets the multiverse, and it's somehow worse than all three things separately. The whole nightmare gets casually explained in the Ricklantis Mix-Up, episode 7 of season 3, also called Tales from the Citadel, because the show wanted you to think this was going to be a fun anthology. The episode opens with a commercial for Simple Rick's Simple Wafer Cookies, while showing the Citadel, a massive city-state where infinite Ricks and Mortys live after abandoning their original dimensions. 16 iterations off the central finite curve, there's a Rick who works more with wood than polarity plating. His name is Simple Rick, and he realized long ago that the greatest thing he'd ever create was his daughter. The commercial shows Simple Rick's happiest memory, young Beth blowing out candles on her birthday cake while he films her with a handheld camera, crying happy tears because he loves being a dad. It's genuinely sweet. Then the commercial reveals they captured that moment and run it on a loop through Simple Rick's mind, showing present-day Simple Rick strapped into a chair at the wafer factory with a helmet, forcing him to relive that memory eternally while machinery harvests the brain chemicals that joy produces. Those chemicals go into every Simple Rick's Simple Wafer Cookie. The tagline? Come home to the impossible flavor of your own completion. Let that sink in. They're selling industrialized nostalgia. They found a Rick whose greatest achievement was loving his family, imprisoned him in his own happiest memory, and monetized the neurochemicals his brain produces when experiencing that joy. He's tortured with his own happiness, which is maybe the most dystopian thing the show's ever done. And this is a show that did giant incest babies and talking cat war crimes. The factory where this happens is full of regular worker Ricks doing assembly line jobs for minimum wage. Rick J22 has worked there for 15 years, stamping logos on wafers, while Simple Rick sits in the flavor core, experiencing eternal birthday party bliss, hell. When Rick J22 gets passed over for a promotion given to Cool Rick, who just arrived, he snaps, murders his supervisor, and takes the flavor core hostage. He's trying to escape the Citadel because they told us we were special because we were Ricks, but they stripped us of anything that made us unique. Here's where it gets darker. Rick J, 22, demands a portal gun to escape. The factory owner, Rick D. Sanchez III, wearing a purple suit like Willy Wonka's evil twin, agrees to let him go. Rick J, 22, shuts down Simple Rick's machine to free him, and Simple Rick wakes up confused, asking, "Where am I?" Rick J, 22 tells him, "A bad place, but you're going to a better one soon," and pushes him through a portal. Except it's a portal to the Blender dimension. Simple Rick gets instantly liquefied. The police yell, "That's the oldest trick in the book," because apparently Blender dimension portals are common enough to be cliché. Rick J, 22 realizes he's been tricked and has no leverage left. Rick D. Sanchez III walks into the flavor core, gives an inspiring speech about how the Citadel was founded by Ricks for Ricks to be free, pardons Rick J, 22, and walks him down the assembly line while all the factory workers cheer. They're playing triumphant music. Rick J, 22, is crying tears of joy, thinking he finally escaped wage slavery and achieved freedom. Rick D. Sanchez III leads him outside to a fancy purple hover car, gives him the keys, and shoots him in the back of the head right before he reaches it. Cut to Rick J, 22, now hooked into the Simple Rick machine, with 2 tubes connected to his brain, reliving that walk down the assembly line in an eternal loop, experiencing manufactured freedom over and over while his brain chemistry gets harvested for a new product. Simple Rick, Freedom Wafer selects. The commercial plays. We captured that taste, and we keep giving it to him, so he can give it right back to you, in every bite. Come home to the unique flavor of shattering the grand illusion. They literally sell the taste of believing you escaped capitalism. The factory owner murdered a worker and turned his final moments of hope into a product line. Simple Rick got blended to death. Rick J, 22 became the new Simple Rick, and the system continues unchanged. There's probably been dozens of Simple Ricks over the years. Every time one dies or escapes, they just find another Rick having a genuine emotional moment and trap him in it forever. The Citadel still exists. The factory's still running. Right now, in that dimension, someone who loved their daughter or experienced real freedom is strapped to a chair, reliving that memory on loop, while their brain gets milked for cookie flavoring. And millions of Ricks buy those cookies without thinking about it, because the alternative is confronting that their entire society runs on industrialized emotional torture. That's just late-stage capitalism with interdimensional technology. The ghost isn't supernatural. It's the hollowed-out shell of someone who used to be happy, now trapped in their own joy forever, feeding an economy built on harvesting the one thing they had that was real. Let's continue our video with the post-Citadel destruction refugees. Evil Morty hacked every portal gun in the Citadel to redirect to death dimensions, turned the resurrection system into a liquefier that used Ricks and Mortys as battery fluid, then broke through the central finite curve, while the entire megacity tore itself apart, killing thousands. The survivors became refugees floating in the wreckage of their civilization, realizing their entire existence was built inside a cosmic baby crib designed to stroke one man's ego across infinite realities. This is what happens when your whole society is founded on, what if we only existed in universes where Grandpa is the smartest, and then someone decides to break the aquarium? The whole apocalypse goes down in Rick Mirai Jack, episode 10 of season 5, the season finale that made everyone go, "Wait, that's canon now?" Evil Morty, now President Morty, after rigging the Citadel elections, invites Rick C-137 to dinner, specifically to scan his brain for the schematics to destroy the central finite curve. The curve is basically a wall around infinity, separating all the universes, where Rick is the smartest man, from all the universes where he isn't, which means every Rick and Morty has spent their entire existence inside one infinite crib, built around an infinite baby. Evil Morty's words, not mine, but absolutely accurate. When Evil Morty activates his plan, he hacks the entire city's portal supply. Every portal gun on the Citadel gets remotely reprogrammed to open to nightmare dimensions. A Rick tries to escape and gets sucked into the Blender dimension. We hear his death scream. Another Rick gets incinerated by a flamethrower on the other end. A Morty gets grabbed by robot tentacles and torn in half. Another Morty gets sucked into a blending tube. Mass panic erupts. The Citadel news broadcast shows the headline, "We're F% KED. They censored themselves during the apocalypse," which is weirdly professional. The anchor Rick D. 716 says, "Eat shit. Fuck you. The drug companies paid me to say every word. I have millions of dollars, and I don't care." Then tries to use his portal gun, and gets dragged through by a tentacled alien screaming, "Oh God, oh fuck, No. But the real nightmare is Operation Phoenix, the Citadel's resurrection system, where dead Ricks and Mortys get cloned and brought back. Orange Afro Rick tells his Morty, "Don't worry, we still got a way out they never thought of. Operation Phoenix," then hands him a gun. The Morty shoots his Rick, then gets crushed by a falling pillar. He wakes up in a resurrection vat going, "Wait, I survived?" Then the computer voice says, "Rerouted, rerouted, rerouted." Blender blades appear at the bottom of the vats. Thousands of Ricks and Mortys wake up in their resurrection chambers, only to immediately get liquefied, and their blood gets pumped directly into powering evil Morty's dimensional drive beam. They tried to cheat death, and instead became the fuel for destroying their own civilization. The deformed Mortys crawling out of the sewers add another layer of horror. These are Mortys who've been working in the portal fluid mines, presumably the ones who weren't pretty enough or functional enough to be assigned to Ricks. Evil Morty kept them underground manufacturing portal fluid, while the normal Mortys lived above. When the Citadel starts tearing apart, they all crawl out like they've been waiting for this, covered in filth, some of them trying to warn people that death is coming for us all, before getting shot by police Mortys for hurting the Citadel experience. Rick saves himself and our Morty by getting to Mortyberg, a circular district that can detach from the main Citadel. He hits the disengage button, and this whole section of the city separates and fires thrusters to escape the dimensional rift that's consuming everything. They're sitting on a train with dozens of deformed Mortys, all refugees now, watching their home explode behind them as the central finite curve tears open. The boosters won't activate without a partner because, of course, even escape pods have built-in codependency requirements. So Rick and Morty have to work together to engage them while the rift tries to suck them back in. The Citadel explodes. Thousands dead. The survivors in Mortyberg are now floating in space with no infrastructure, no portal fluid, no way home, and the knowledge that their entire civilization was built on a lie. Evil Morty revealed that Mortys aren't naturally occurring. The Citadel runs a cloning factory that produces Mortys, brainwashes them with fake memories, and assigns them to Ricks as replacements when the original Mortys die. We see the process. Naked Mortys in cages, screaming, Morty sent down a slide, helmet put on his head, brainwashed with a dead Morty's memories, sent through a portal to replace him. There aren't infinite versions of our grandfather Morty. He's an infinite smear of one shitty old man. Cut to the end of the episode, showing dozens of dead Ricks and Mortys floating in space around the destroyed Citadel campaign manager, Morty, Cop Morty, Big Morty, Investigator Rick, the Shadow Council Ricks, all corpses now. The documents revealing evil Morty's true identity, an eye patch-wearing Morty who controlled a puppet Rick, float away into the void. Nobody left alive to read them. Evil Morty escapes through a golden portal to somewhere outside the curve, finally free. Everyone else is either dead or stranded in the ruins. The Mortyberg refugees are still out there somewhere, floating in space, trying to figure out how to survive in a multiverse that suddenly has no central finite curve protecting them. They're haunting the corpse of their own society, realizing they were always just props in someone else's ego trip across infinity. Now, entering the Purge planet, where everyone's a monster. Rick and Morty stopped on a planet for windshield wiper fluid, and accidentally spent the night watching thousands of people gleefully murder each other during their annual crime. His legal festival, Morty went absolutely berserk, killing hundreds of strangers while screaming with joy, and then Rick revealed it was all because of a drug and some candy bars, except the final shot shows the rapper, saying the bars were actually drug-free, meaning Morty just genuinely loves consequence-free murder, and always has. This is what happens when you discover that removing consequences doesn't change who people are, it reveals who they've always been. The whole nightmare starts in Look Who's Purging Now, Episode 9 of Season 2, when Rick and Morty crash land on a planet to get wiper fluid. A local tells them they should be gone by sundown, because that's when the festival begins one night a year, where all crime is legal, and everyone runs around robbing and murdering each other without consequence. Rick immediately recognizes it. It's like The Purge, Morty. That movie, The Purge. The guy even asks, "Have you been here before?" Like Rick's casually visited multiple Purge planets, the way normal people visit different Starbucks locations. Rick explains he's been to planets that call it the Cleansing, the Red Time, and one world that went with the incredibly on-the-nose name Murder Night. Points for honesty, I guess. The planet's been crime-free and peaceful for millennia, specifically because they have this one night where everyone gets to murder. The socio-political safety valve theory, except it actually works, which is somehow more disturbing. Morty's horrified and wants to leave. Rick wants to watch from the ship like it's the galaxy's most messed up reality TV show. They compromise by watching from the safety of their spacecraft as the festival begins, and it gets brutal immediately. people getting decapitated, dismembered, tortured in the streets, while their neighbors cheer. Rick actually gets sick watching it, rare for a guy who sees shit like that for breakfast, and decides to leave. But then they see a girl named Arthresia being attacked, and Morty guilt trips Rick into saving her by threatening to tell Beth they were there. Classic Morty manipulation tactics. They kill a bunch of Purgers, rescuing her, and Rick's having the time of his life going, "This is fucking awesome." Because apparently murder's way more fun when you have the moral high ground of saving someone. Arthresia seems grateful. They take her to the ship, and everything's fine until she pulls the grandmother card. She claims her Nana needs rescuing. Rick and Morty go inside the house to help, and Arthresia shoots Rick in the liver and steals the spaceship. Rick staggers out going, "Fucking Amish bitch shot me." She does kinda dress like space Amish, and now they're stranded during active purge hours, with no portal gun, no weapons, and Rick bleeding out from a liver wound. They fight their way through waves of attackers. Rick throws some kind of disintegration device at the first group and bluffs the rest by pretending he has more, but he's actually just holding a box of Tic Tacs. The galaxy's smartest man, playing the ultimate bluff with breath mints. They make it to a lighthouse, where the keeper agrees to help them on the condition they listen to his screenplay, his entire screenplay, about a woman named Jacy, who gets her high heels stuck in a sewer grate and ends up in some convoluted romantic thriller. Morty sits through the whole thing, trying to be polite. The lighthouse keeper demands real feedback. Morty says the 3 weeks earlier structure doesn't work, and the keeper loses it, calling Morty insecure and petty. When he tries to kick them out during the purge, Morty shoves him down the stairs and breaks his neck, then stands over the body yelling, "You like that? You want me to cut to 3 weeks earlier when you were alive?" Brutal one-liner from a kid who was trying to be nice about hating your screenplay 5 minutes ago. This is when Morty goes full berserker mode. They find the ship and Morty starts killing everyone, set to Tony. Tony. This feels good. The show's using a 90 seconds R&B jam as the soundtrack to mass murder, which is a choice. Morty's screaming, "Suck my dick," and "Eat this," while mowing down Purgers. Rick points out some people were just hiding, and Morty goes, "I don't give a shit." He keeps shooting corpses long after they're dead. Rick has to physically stun him unconscious, because Morty's threatening to rip Rick's guts out and smear them on his face. When Morty wakes up, Rick explains it was Purginol in those candy bars, a chemical that amplifies violent tendencies. Morty's relieved. "Thank goodness for that, huh? Your character's totally protected. The drug made him do it. He's still good old Morty." Except the final shot shows Rick throwing away the candy bar wrapper. The camera zooms in. The label reads, "Now Purginol free." The bars never had the drug. Morty's rampage was 100% organic, free-range violence. He loved killing those people because he genuinely enjoys consequence-free murder, and Rick lied to protect Morty's self-image because the truth would destroy him. Meanwhile, Rick and Arthresia find the rich elites who created the Purge system and massacre them all, also set to Feels Good, because apparently that's just the official murder anthem now. Arthresia's screaming, "Happy festival, cocksuckers, suck my cock, chew my balls," while butchering aristocrats in formal wear. Rick initially passes, but then joins in going, "Fuck it," and they dance over the corpses. The common people are finally free to build a just society. Cut to them immediately arguing about food distribution. Someone has to track who works and who gets paid. Someone else says that's not a real job. They pull knives. Someone suggests they designate a period of time to get all this hate, murder, and rage out of our system. They're reinventing the Purge in real time, probably before the blood from the last one is even dry. That planet's still there, still purging annually, probably. And somewhere in the multiverse there's infinite versions of it, all trapped in the same cycle, all convinced they're civilized except for one night a year when they stop pretending. The haunting part isn't the violence, it's that everyone enjoys it. Morty enjoyed it. The candy bars were drug-free the whole time. When consequences disappear, people don't become monsters. They just stop pretending they aren't. Let's carry on with the Vindicators Saw Dungeon. Rick got so blackout drunk, he murdered the galaxy's biggest supervillain, built an elaborate Saw-style death trap for his superhero frenemies, and set it all up with video monitors showing drunk him, explaining the rules, then woke up the next morning with zero memory of any of it, and had to watch his heroes. He hates tear each other apart in rooms designed to exploit their exact psychological vulnerabilities. The kicker? The whole dungeon was built to honor Noob Noob, the janitor, not Morty. This is what happens when the smartest man in the universe gets hammered and decides to do everyone's job for them while also making them suffer for being self-righteous assholes. The whole nightmare goes down in Vindicators 3, The Return of World Ender, Episode 4 of Season 3, when Morty uses his 1 in every 10 adventures card to force Rick to team up with the Vindicators again, a group of Avengers-style superheroes Rick openly despises. They show up at the Vindicators' ship for a mission briefing about World Ender, the big bad guy who ends worlds. Rick's being his usual dismissive self, making fun of Million Ants. I just assumed that was Turdman, Wiggly Turdman, roasting Crocubot for being half cold, unfeeling reptile, half also cold, equally unfeeling machine, and generally pissing everyone off until Vance Maximus arrives. Vance mentions this is their third mission together, which confuses Morty because he thought they'd only done one Vindicators adventure. Turns out the Vindicators did Vindicators 2 without Rick and Morty last summer, because of personality conflicts translation. Rick's such an unbearable dick they'd rather risk dying than invite him. They lost 3 heroes, Lady Katana, Calypso, and Diablo Verde, but still had to call Rick back for this mission, because apparently you can't save the universe without the guy who calls you Wiggly Turd Man. Fast forward to the next morning, the team arrives at World Ender's base to find all his henchmen massacred, and World Ender himself, hanging from a hook with his guts spilling out. A giant monitor lowers, showing blackout drunk Rick going, "Hello Vindicators, welcome to your reckoning, baby why?" Drunk Rick explains he came there last night, killed World Ender solo, and built a death game because he thought, why not just do your job for you so we can have a little fun game. Rick sober, present-day Rick, is mortified because he genuinely doesn't remember doing any of this. The first death happens immediately. Vance Maximus has a panic attack about being trapped, flies up to a ceiling vent screaming, "I need space from this," and gets shredded by booby traps, gunshots, electrical shocks, chainsaw, slicing blade. His lower half falls to the floor, and one rocket boot turns on, sending his remains flying across the room, spattering blood everywhere. Crocubot has to laser them out of the air, which is probably the most considerate thing anyone does, all episode. The dungeon forces them through rooms designed to expose their worst secrets. Crocubot gets crushed between platforms when he confidently picks Dorian. 5 a planet, the Vindicators exterminated to kill a shapeshifter. Hiding there, turns out, heroes. Sometimes commit genocide when it's convenient. The basketball room reveals Supernova and Million Ants had an affair and conceived a child together that died inside her because it was half a million ants and half collapsing star. Alan Rails, Supernova's ex-husband, the ghost train guy, loses it, tries to attack Million Ants, and Supernova traps them both in a force field, while Million Ants enters Alan's mouth and makes him explode from the inside, exactly as horrifying as it sounds. Then Supernova kills Million Ants by crushing his queen ant, causing the entire colony to fall apart into non-sentient regular ants. She's about to murder Rick and Morty when the platform rises to reveal they're at a massive party. Rick planned with logic, performing live, because apparently drunk Rick books celebrity rappers between building death in a set of traps. The final twist? The whole dungeon was about Noob Noob, the Vindicators janitor who Rick bonded with because he laughed at Rick's jokes. Morty thought the final room proved Rick valued him, stepped on the platform, and got sent down a dark ride where drunk Rick's video message said, "You're cool, and you're smart, and I bet we coulda hung out." Then revealed, he was talking to Noob Noob the whole time. Morty emerges from the ride absolutely furious. That dungeon still exists, somewhere in World Ender's fortress. Maybe it's automated, maybe it's waiting. Let's turn our attention to Planetina's eco-terror Earth. Morty fell in love with a sentient environmental goddess created by 4 burnout millennials combining Captain Planet rings, killed all 4 of them to free her from corporate slavery, dated her for like a week, then had to break up with her after she massacred 300 coal miners at a protest site while screaming about saving the Earth. Planetina's still out there right now, alone and radicalized, murdering people to stop climate change, one corpse at a time. This is what happens when you give godlike elemental powers to someone who genuinely believes the ends justify the means, and also got her heart broken by a 4-year-old. The whole nightmare starts in A Rick Convenient Mort, episode 3 of season 5, when Morty meets Planetina at a park cleanup event. She's literally Captain Planet, an elemental superhero created when 4 kids, who are actually middle-aged adults now, because they've been doing this since the mid-90s, combine their elemental set, rings, fire, water, earth, air, combined powers, boom, sentient nature goddess. Except these kids grew up and turned Planetina into a corporate product, charging for autographs, doing convention appearances, selling her to the highest bidder like she's intellectual property instead of a living person. Morty's immediately smitten because Morty's always immediately smitten. They go on dates. she saves wildfires. He travels 200 miles just to save a rabbit at a disaster site to impress her. It's genuinely sweet, until you remember she's being controlled by 4 burnout millennials who literally own her existence and are about to sell her to some Arab overseas who wants to celebrate his purchase over dinner with infant seals. The show's going pretty hard on the rich foreign buyer stereotype here, which is uncomfortable but also kind of the point about how people treat Planetina like property. Morty shows up at a convention to see Planetina and finds her trapped by the Tina-Tears, the 4 adults who create her. Eddie, the fire guy, tries to murder Morty with his ring because Morty's a distraction they can't afford. Morty responds by locking Eddie in a room and burning him alive, using his own fire powers. Then the other 3 Tina-Tears show up and Morty systematically murders all of them, using their elemental rings against them, drowning the water guy, suffocating the air guy, burying the earth lady. 4 corpses later, Planetina's free. They move in together. Well, Planetina tries to move in. Beth says, absolutely not. Beth kicks her out. Morty's devastated. Planetina goes to a coal mine protest because the miners are gutting the land, poisoning the air your children breathe. The miners tell her to leave. They need the jobs. She's just a privileged activist who doesn't understand real life. Planetina snaps and starts massacring them. We see her using elemental powers to kill 300 people, while Morty watches in horror, unable to stop her. The breakup scene is brutal. Morty says, "You murdered 300 people," and Planetina responds, "And you murdered my kids." Which is technically true. Morty killed the 4 Tina-Tears, but they were trying to sell her into slavery. The miners were just trying to work. Planetina's justification? Those innocent miners voted men into power to protect their precious jobs so they can buy more plastic garbage and eat the corpses of tortured animals. The system is broken, Morty. This is the only way I can save Earth. The only way I can save you. Morty ends it. If that's the only way, I don't want to be saved. Planetina leaves saying, "I'll go. But don't you dare ask me to understand." The episode ends with her still out there, still fighting for environmental causes, presumably still murdering people who stand in her way. That Earth still exists. Planetina's immortal, she's made of natural elements, so she probably can't die. The 4 people who could stop her are dead, murdered by Morty to free her, which is darkly ironic considering she immediately became a worse problem. She's radicalized, heartbroken, and completely convinced that mass murder is justified environmental activism. Every coal mine, every oil rig, every corporation polluting that planet is now a potential massacre site. The haunting part? She's probably right about the environmental stuff. The planet is dying. The miners' DID vote for politicians who prioritize jobs over ecology. The system is broken. But her solution is murder everyone who participates in the system, which includes basically everyone. That's eco-fascism with elemental superpowers. And she's never going to stop because she genuinely believes she's saving the world, one corpse at a time. Now, we'll uncover Mr. Jellybean's kingdom. Morty went on a fantasy adventure to prove adventures could be simple and fun, got sexually assaulted in a bathroom by a talking Jellybean who turned out to be the kingdom's beloved ruler. "Rick murdered," said Jellybean, with an energy pistol through a portal. And then the post-credits scene revealed the king had a lockbox full of photos of other child victims that the villagers found and deliberately burned to preserve his legacy, because our people will get more from the idea he represented than from the Jellybean he actually was. That kingdom still has statues of their pedophile king with his hand on a child's shoulder. This is what happens when societies choose comfortable lies over devastating truths. The whole nightmare goes down in Me Seeks and Destroy, episode 5 of season 1. When Morty bets Rick he can plan a better adventure than Rick's usual traumatic chaos. Morty picks a generic fantasy world with giants and treasure, and whimsical taverns full of staircase-shaped people, because they live in steps leading to a giant's castle, which is exactly the kind of detail Morty thinks makes adventures fun. Everything's going fine until Morty goes to the bathroom and meets Mr. Jellybean. Mr. Jellybean introduces himself friendly enough, asks about Morty's adventure, gives him a pep talk about going with the flow. Then he rubs Morty's shoulders. Morty tries to leave. Mr. Jellybean locks the door and attacks him, explicitly trying to sexually assault him while Morty screams for help. The show cuts away to Rick drunkenly singing Sweet Home Alabama at karaoke, because of course Rick's having a great time while Morty's fighting for his life in a bathroom. We hear Morty yelling "Stop" and "Please" before he gets the upper hand and slams the toilet lid on Jellybean's head repeatedly until he's unconscious. Morty emerges traumatized, wanting to go home immediately. Rick sees the badly beaten Jellybean stumble out of the bathroom and pieces together what happened. He agrees to end the adventure, wins a bunch of schmeckles, the local currency, gambling, and they give the money to the villagers to help their poor village. Heartwarming ending, right? Except the villagers want to introduce them to their beloved king, so he can thank them personally. The king is Mr. Jellybean, carried out on a throne, same character who just tried to rape Morty minutes earlier. Morty immediately says, no, it's cool, Rick. Portal, hurry. They escape through a portal, then Rick opens another portal, sticks an energy weapon through it, and shoots Mr. Jellybean, splattering him across the screaming villagers. Rare moment of Rick doing something purely protective, with zero benefit to himself. The post-credit scene is where this goes from dark to haunting. Two villagers find a lockbox in the dead king's closet. Inside are photos many young boys Jellybean had molested, evidence of serial child abuse by their beloved leader. One villager says, "We have to tell the people." The other villager says, "Wait, destroy it." They set the box on fire while explaining that the people will get more from the idea he represented than from the Jellybean he actually was. Cut to a statue of King Jellybean standing next to a young boy with his hand on the kid's shoulder. The exact pose you'd see in every friendly authority figure, statue in every town square, now recontextualized as a monument to a predator. The villagers walk away, having chosen to preserve the comfortable lie rather than face the uncomfortable truth. That kingdom still exists. The statue's still there. The citizens still believe their beloved king was a hero who cared about children. Any survivors who remember what really happened have to live in a society that honors their abuser, that literally built monuments to him, that deliberately destroyed evidence to maintain his legacy. This is the show doing a brutal speedrun of every institutional cover-up in history: the Catholic Church, Penn State, USA Gymnastics, pick your scandal. The pattern's always the same. Evidence emerges. People in power decide the institution's reputation matters more than the victims. Burn the evidence, preserve the myth. The haunting part? The villagers aren't evil. They genuinely think they're doing the right thing for their community. They're choosing collective comfort over individual justice, which is how every cover-up happens. And somewhere in that dimension right now, there's probably another Mr. Jellybean, another beloved authority figure, hurting kids, while everyone looks away, because acknowledging the truth would shatter too many illusions. The real monsters don't look like monsters, they look like kings. Alright, now let's head to the Microverse battery, Infinite Nested Slaves. The Microverse battery, Rick's car battery, contains an entire universe where billions of people spend their lives stomping on power generators, thinking they're contributing to society, when actually they're just making Rick's car go vroom. Inside that universe, a scientist named Zeep created his own universe battery, where different people crank different generators for the same scam. Inside that universe, another scientist named Kyle is building his own slave universe with a pulley system. It's slavery all the way down, except everyone thinks they're free because they get paid and have mortgages. These universes still exist right now, powering Rick's brake lights. The whole recursive nightmare goes down in The Ricks Must Be Crazy, episode 6 of season 2, when Rick's car won't start because the Microverse battery is malfunctioning. Rick explains he put a spatially tessellated void inside a modified temporal field until a planet developed intelligent life, gave them electricity, and now some of it goes to power my engine and charge my phone and stuff. Morty immediately calls it slavery. Rick responds with the episode's thesis statement, "It's society. They work for each other, Morty. They pay each other. They buy houses. They get married and make children that replace them when they get too old to make power." Morty's not buying it. That just sounds like slavery with extra steps. Rick and Morty shrink down into the Microverse and discover the people there worship Rick as an alien benefactor who gave them the gift of Google Box technology, devices you stomp on that generate electricity while, safely, removing the dangerous waste power to a special disposal volcano. There is no volcano. The power just goes to Rick's car, but telling them that would ruin the vibe. They have a holiday called Rick's Giving. They teach kids about Rick in school. They genuinely believe their lives have meaning and purpose beyond being biological batteries. Then they meet Zeep, the Microverse's smartest scientist, who Rick immediately hates, because Zeep is basically Rick, but younger, and with better hair. Zeep invented a miniverse, his own universe, in a box where people turn flubal cranks to generate power, 80% of which gets siphoned to the Microverse. When Rick accuses Zeep of running a slavery operation, Zeep uses Rick's exact defense. They work for each other in exchange for money. Rick throws Morty's line back. "Well, that just sounds like slavery with extra steps." Zeep responds, "Eek Barba Durkle. Somebody's gonna get laid in college," which is his universe's version of ooh la la, proving even insults are recursive in nested realities. The recursion goes deeper. Inside Zeep's miniverse, they find Kyle developing a Teenyverse with Bluebell Yanks, a pulley-based power generation system, because apparently every level of reality needs a differently named box you interact with to make electricity for your masters. When Zeep realizes what Kyle's doing, he has an existential crisis. Wait a minute, did you create my universe? Is my universe a miniverse? Rick corrects him. Microverse. Kyle chimes in, Teenyverse. The argument about what to call the slavery is somehow more important than the slavery itself. Here's where it gets properly haunting. Zeep can't shut down his miniverse even after realizing he's in a microverse that's in a car battery. Because if he stops generating power, Rick will kill everyone in the microverse. Rick explicitly threatens this. When I get out of this Teenyverse, I'm gonna get out of the surrounding miniverse, and then the microverse around that. And guess what? He'll destroy everything. Zeep is trapped maintaining his own slave universe to prevent Rick from destroying his slave universe. It's mutually assured slavery. The episode ends with Zeep giving Rick the finger, which in their culture means peace among worlds. Another joke about how Rick taught them the wrong meaning, accepting his fate as a permanently enslaved scientist who must enslave others to survive. The microverse is still running. The miniverse is still running. Kyle probably finished his Teenyverse, which means there's another level of nested slavery Rick doesn't even know about. These universes still exist. Right now, in Rick's garage, there are at least 3 nested realities, full of billions of sentient beings working their entire lives to generate power for entities they'll never meet, in a hierarchy of exploitation where everyone's both slave and master. They think they're free because they have money and jobs and families. The system's so perfectly designed, they can't even comprehend their batteries. That's just capitalism with sci-fi aesthetics and better special effects. Let's move on to the Blender dimension, fragmented consciousness. If you're enjoying our content, subscribe to our channel. The Blender dimension, fragmented consciousness. Rick keeps a portal preset to a dimension that's just a giant blender and uses it to murder people by liquefying them instantly. Except maybe instantly is optimistic. Maybe it's not death, but relocation to a place where your consciousness gets pureed along with your body, scattered into infinite screaming particles that used to be you, but can't reassemble or stop existing. The Blender dimension doesn't kill you, it fragments you into aware molecular chaos, forever. And Rick treats this like flushing a toilet. The Blender dimension shows up in The Ricks Must Be Crazy, episode 6 of season 2, during Rick's conflict with Zeep, inside the nested battery universes. When Rick's trying to escape from the Teenyverse, the universe inside, the miniverse, inside the microverse, inside his car battery, yeah, it's recursive slavery all the way down. He tells Zeep he's gonna grab his wallet from his ship. Zeep knows Rick's lying because the ship has the transporter, so going to grab a wallet is obviously code for escape and destroy your universe. Rick's response? He grabs Zeep, opens a portal, and threatens to throw him through to the Blender dimension. But the clearest demonstration happens earlier in the episode when Rick and Zeep are fighting in the microverse. Rick tricks Simple Rick, a version of Rick whose greatest achievement was loving his daughter by telling him to step through a portal for freedom. Simple Rick walks through and gets instantly blended with a geyser of blood. The negotiator Rick watching this go, "God damn it," because they just lost their hostage. Rick shrugs it off. The Blender dimension is just another tool in his arsenal, like a portal gun preset to Milwaukee, but way more fatal. Here's what makes it cosmically horrifying. Portals don't destroy things, they relocate them. When you step through a portal to Earth, you arrive on Earth intact. When you step through a portal to the Blender dimension, you arrive in a blender, which means there's an actual place, an actual dimension, that functions as a cosmic Vitamix. And if consciousness survives portal travel, which it does, that's the whole point of portals, then what happens to your awareness when your body gets liquefied? The episode treats it like instant death, blood spray, person gone, moving on. But quantum mechanics gets weird with consciousness. Your neurons firing "I am me" don't necessarily stop just because the neurons are scattered. They're still neurons. They're still firing electrical impulses. They're just doing it while suspended in a slurry of what used to be your organs. And if your consciousness is quantum, which some theories suggest, then fragmenting it doesn't eliminate it, it just distributes it across every particle that used to comprise you. So maybe Simple Rick is still alive in there, not as Rick. As thousands of Rick particles, each one maintaining some fragment of awareness, unable to think coherent thoughts, because thinking requires a brain, and brains require structural integrity, but still experiencing, something, sensation, without form, awareness, without identity, the subjective experience of being scattered, matter that remembers being a person. The show uses the Blender dimension as a casual murder method, Rick threatens people with it. Evil Morty hacks portal guns in Rick Mirai Jack to redirect them there, killing Ricks and Mortys across the Citadel. We hear their screams as they get blended. It's treated like a death trap in a video game messy, but ultimately just another way to remove someone from existence. But if consciousness persists through fragmentation, then every person Rick's ever sent there is still experiencing their own liquefaction in some horrific eternal now. And the blender dimension is still running. Rick didn't create it, he just found a dimension that happens to function as a giant blender and started using it as a waste disposal for inconvenient people, which means it's probably been running for billions of years, blending whatever falls into it, accumulating an ocean of fragments that used to be conscious beings from across the multiverse. Every molecule in that dimension might be screaming. The whole place could be one massive chorus of fragmented awareness, billions of partial consciousnesses suspended in chaos, unable to die because they're already not alive, unable to think because thought requires structure, just existing as pure, scattered sensation forever. That dimension's still there, still blending, still accumulating. And somewhere in that cosmic smoothie is simple Rick, who just wanted to love his daughter, now distributed across a trillion particles that can't remember being him, but can't stop experiencing being nothing. Now let's shift our focus to the timeline where Summer was never born. Summer looked through quantum goggles and saw every timeline where she doesn't exist, and in all of them, her parents are successful, fulfilled, and happy. Beth's a surgeon saving human lives instead of horse lives. Jerry's a famous actor doing cocaine with Johnny Depp. They're living their dreams because they never got pregnant at 17, never had the shotgun wedding, never sacrificed their potential for a kid they didn't plan. Summer realizes she's the accident that destroyed two people's futures, and those timelines still exist right now, running parallel, where everyone's better off because she was never born. The whole existential crisis kicks off in Ricksty Minutes, episode 8 of season 1, when Rick upgrades the cable to show TV from infinite dimensions. The family gets bored watching interdimensional commercials, though Ants in My Eyes Johnson is genuinely unsettling, a man who can't see or feel anything selling electronics while literally on fire. Rick tosses them goggles that scan your retinas and let you view parallel timelines through genetically matching versions of your eyes. Basically, you can watch what your life would be like if you'd made different choices. Beth sees herself as a human surgeon winning a Nobel Prize. Jerry sees himself taming lions in movies, hanging out with Leonardo DiCaprio, banging Kristen Stewart. Summer keeps searching and only finds two variations: timelines where her parents are playing Yahtzee, or timelines where they're playing Chutes and Ladders. She's stuck in boring suburban family life in every reality where she exists. She notices the pattern. It seems like when I exist, life gets a little more predictable. Beth tries to soften this. When two people create a life together, they set aside their previous lives as individuals. Jerry's not having it. We're not heroes for having unprotected sex on prom night. The fight escalates until Summer asks the question that's been hovering unspoken. You thought about getting an abortion? Beth's response is devastating in its casualness. Everyone thinks about it. Obviously, I'm the version of me that didn't do it, so you're welcome. Not, I'm glad I had you, or you're the best thing that happened to us. Just, you're welcome, like Summer, should be grateful they didn't abort her, like her existence is a favor they granted rather than a choice they made. The really haunting part? Those timelines are still running. Right now, in countless parallel realities, there's a Beth who became a surgeon, a Jerry who became an actor, and no Summer. They're not mourning her absence because she never existed to be missed. They're just happy, fulfilled, living the lives they actually wanted instead of the compromise-laden existence they settled for. Summer decides to run away, planning to move to the southwest and do something with turquoise, which Jerry correctly identifies as either code for crystal meth or a gateway to it. Morty stops her by showing her his own grave in the backyard. He and Rick destroyed their original dimension and jumped to this one, where their counterparts died. So Morty eats breakfast 20 yards from his own rotting corpse every morning. His thesis: nobody exists on purpose, nobody belongs anywhere, everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV? It's meant to be comforting if nothing matters, and everything's random, then being an accident isn't uniquely bad. But here's what makes this cosmically cruel. Morty jumped dimensions once by choice. Summer jumps dimensions constantly through those goggles, watching infinite versions of her parents who are happier without her. She can't escape to a reality where she matters because the only realities where she exists are the ones where her parents gave up their dreams. Those timelines still exist. Beth is still performing surgery. Jerry is still famous. They're still happy, still fulfilled, completely unaware that in another dimension there's a version of them who got pregnant and gave up everything, and a daughter who knows she's the reason. Every time Summer has a fight with her parents, every time they seem disappointed or frustrated or tired, she can put on those goggles and confirm, yes, they would have been better off without me. The multiverse doesn't just show you what could have been, it shows you what is, somewhere else, running parallel forever. Summer exists in a reality where she's the cosmic mistake that killed two futures, and she knows it, and she has to live with it. That's just being a teenager with access to quantum proof that you ruined everything. Now let's move to Morty Jr.'s violent biology. Morty bought a sex robot from an alien pawn shop, accidentally impregnated it, and 24 hours later had a teenage son who desperately wants to murder everyone on Earth, but can't because he inherited just enough of Morty's DNA to feel guilty about it. Morty Jr. is genetically programmed for galactic-level violence. His species are literally described as one of the most aggressively violent creatures in the universe, but he's also half-human, which means he's cursed to spend his entire life fighting biological urges he never asked for and can't fully suppress. He's not evil, he's just born wrong, and he knows it. The whole genetic nightmare kicks off in Raising Gazorpazorp, episode 7 of season 1, when Morty convinces Rick to buy him a cool robot from an alien pawn shop. Rick knows it's a sex robot. Morty doesn't or pretends not to, unclear which is more embarrassing. The robot transforms, tries to fly away, and spits out an egg containing Morty Jr., who is half Morty and half Gazorpazorpian. Rick immediately wants to destroy it because this thing could grow to the size of Delaware and might eat brains and exhale space aids. Morty refuses. He names the baby Morty. Junior Rick's response, "Oh crap, he named it." The cardinal rule of sci-fi parenting, never name the thing that might become a monster. Morty Jr. grows to teenager size in one day. His first words aren't mama or dada, they're death, damnation, destruction, domination. Morty tries to teach him to dance instead of kill. Morty Jr. responds, "I'd like to dance on the graves of my enemies." When Morty asks what he wants to do, Morty Jr. says he wants to conquer the planet and complains that all the people and animals are outside where he can't reach them. Morty lies and tells him the air is poisonous, that he'll die instantly if he leaves the house. Classic parenting strategy. Imprison your kid with fabricated environmental hazards. The really haunting part? Morty Jr. isn't choosing violence. He's fighting it. He's trapped between two genetic imperatives that are tearing him apart. His Gazorpazorpian DNA is screaming kill everything, while his Morty DNA is whispering, maybe just play video games. He doesn't want to be a monster, but his biology is literally engineered for planetary domination. His neurons fire murder signals constantly, and he has to consciously suppress them every single second. Eventually, Morty Jr. discovers the air isn't poisonous, because Morty shoved him during an argument, and he realized he's been lied to about everything. He runs outside, and immediately starts destroying the city, lifting cars, and roaring, living out every violent impulse his DNA demands. But when Morty confronts him, Morty Jr. breaks down. "Dad, I'm so confused. He's not a villain having fun, he's a kid whose genetic code is at war with itself." The solution? Brad Anderson, creator of Marmaduke, appears and explains he's haunted by uncontrollable thoughts of mutilations and sexual assaults on a near-daily basis, but channels it into his comic strip work, which is both deeply disturbing and weirdly the darkest. Marmaduke lore possible. Morty Jr. decides to become a writer, channeling his murder impulses into fiction. He writes a best-selling book called My Horrible Father, about the trauma of being locked in a house under false pretenses by a parent who was terrified of him. But here's the thing. Channeling violent urges into art doesn't eliminate them. Morty Jr. still wants to slit people's throats. Writing just gives him a socially acceptable outlet. He'll spend his entire life managing impulses most people never experience. Every social interaction is a battle against biology. Every moment of kindness is a victory over genetic programming. He didn't ask to be born half-murder species. He didn't choose to have conquer the planet hardwired into his brainstem. And he's not unique. Male Gazorpazorpians all go through this, which is why the females separated them and gave them a separate planet to fight on. The entire species is cursed with violent biology that makes peaceful civilization impossible. Morty Jr. is just the only one who inherited enough human DNA to care about not being a monster, which might actually be worse. The other Gazorpazorpians get to embrace their nature. Morty Jr. has to fight his forever, knowing he'll never fully win. That's a life sentence. Next, we have the Beyond the Curve, True Infinity's Void. Evil Morty broke through the central finite curve and escaped into actual infinity, which sounds super triumphant until you realize he basically deleted himself from the only section of the multiverse with guardrails and wandered off into cosmic wilderness, where Rick isn't special and things exist that would treat humanity like we treat bacteria. Do bacteria even know we exist? Exactly. The curve wasn't some philosophical concept. Rick literally built a wall around realities where he's guaranteed to be the smartest guy in the room. Outside that bubble, no promises. Evil Morty traded a prison for the void, and now he's out there dealing with whatever nightmare fuel Rick specifically designed the curve to keep out. Freedom's great, until you realize the cage was also keeping monsters away from you. Mortrican. Season 7, Episode 5. Casually drops the thing about the curve that everyone should have been more worried about from the start. Rick didn't just cluster some nearby dimensions for convenience. He cordoned off an entire chunk of infinity, where Rick is the smartest, is literally a law of physics. Every universe inside the curve operates on the same fundamental rule. Rick Sanchez is the apex intelligence, which means, and let's really sit with this, he deliberately excluded infinite realities where he's not, realities where he's average, realities where he's the dumbest guy in the room, realities where beings exist so ridiculously intelligent that Rick's portal gun is basically a Fisher-Price toy to them. The irony of Rick building a safe space after spending 7 seasons mocking safe spaces is not lost on. Number 5. Evil Morty shattered the curve in the Season 5 finale, which the show frames as this huge victory moment. He's screaming about being free while the Citadel explodes behind him like he's in a Michael Bay movie. And yeah, congrats on escaping the Rick-themed prison dimension, but let's talk about what he actually escaped into. True infinity. No walls. No rules. No guarantee that physics works the same way. No promise that consciousness operates on principles Evil Morty understands. He's basically that person who quit their toxic job without another one lined up and is now discovering that rent still exists. The scariest part of Unmortrican happens when Rick's dimension fracking device, yes, Rick is literally fracking the multiverse, because of course he is, causes shockwaves that hit Evil Morty outside the curve. Evil Morty's reaction? Annoyed. The shockwaves have more range than I thought. He broke through to another section of infinity entirely, and Rick's bullshit is still reaching him. That's like moving to another country to escape your ex, and then finding out they're somehow still showing up in your recommended follows algorithm-based harassment. Truly the modern nightmare. It proves 2 things. The curve isn't as isolated as everyone thought, and Evil Morty can't actually escape Rick, even after demolishing the only barrier between them. So what's actually out there beyond the curve? The show doesn't tell us. That's the horror. It's like when horror movies don't show the monster, because what you imagine is worse than anything they could show you. Shout out to Jaws for basically inventing that. Inside the curve, you know the parameters. Rick is the smartest. Portal guns work. Physics is comprehensible. Outside, absolutely no guarantees. There could be dimensions where thinking is done differently. Realities where 3-dimensional beings are as limited as characters in Flatland. Great book. Extremely anxiety-inducing concept. Entities that view Rick Prime like we view a really clever dog, impressive for a dog, but still fundamentally a dog. Evil Morty stole the Omega device schematics, which we'll get to in the next section, but the point is, he's now alone in true infinity, with the multiverse's most dangerous weapon and zero backup plan. He threatens Rick at the end. I can end the Rick experiment anytime I want, but using that weapon puts a target on his back. Every Rick he erases has family who'd hunt him down. He's playing the most intense game of don't make me use this ever invented, and he's playing it in territory where the rules don't apply. The episode ends with Evil Morty disappearing into the void. Free, sure. Alone, absolutely. And somewhere in actual infinity right now, he's dealing with whatever Rick built the curve to avoid. Maybe he's fine. He's smart, ruthless, survived Rick for years. Maybe he's encountered cosmic horrors that make the curve look like a playground fence keeping kids from wandering into traffic. Maybe he found beings so beyond comprehension that the Omega device is irrelevant because they exist outside the concept of dimensions entirely. Imagine showing up with a gun to fight something that doesn't have a body. Awkward. The curve is still broken, the wall is still shattered. Evil Morty is out there in the true infinite void where Rick isn't special and nothing is guaranteed. And honestly, I'm not sure which is worse. Finally, we have the Rick Prime's Omega device, omni-genocide weapon. Rick Prime invented a weapon that erases people from existence across all dimensions simultaneously, and the first thing he did with it was delete Diane, every version of her, everywhere, forever. The show treats this like it's just another sci-fi gadget, but let's be clear about what this actually is. A button that commits infinite murder in one press. One trigger pull, And you don't just kill someone, you retroactively remove them from the fundamental fabric of reality across every possible timeline. And Evil Morty has the blueprints now, which is like giving the nuclear codes to a teenager who's already mad at everyone appropriate, considering he is a teenager who's mad at everyone. The mechanics are genuinely nightmare fuel when you think about them. The Omega device doesn't target coordinates in space or time, it targets identity itself. It finds every quantum possibility where a specific person exists and terminates them all at once. Diane, who married Rick, gone. Diane, who never met Rick, also gone. Diane, who became an astronaut, deleted. Diane, who lived in ancient Rome somehow through multiverse weirdness, erased. The weapon doesn't care about choices or timelines or alternate histories. It finds every instance of Diane-ness across infinity and hits delete like she's a spam email, except way more permanent and infinitely more horrifying. What makes this philosophically messed up is the causality problem. When you erase someone from all dimensions, you're rewriting every event they ever influenced, every conversation they had that changed someone's mind, every child they might have saved by being a doctor in one timeline, every invention they inspired in another. The ripple effects spread out like dropping a nuke into a pond, except the pond is infinite, and the nuke removes the concept of water entirely. That metaphor got away from me, but you get it. Some timelines probably collapsed entirely because Diane was load-bearing to their existence. The multiverse runs on probability and causality, and the Omega device just sets both on fire. Rick Prime built this specifically to hurt Rick C137, which is honestly the most extra way to settle a grudge ever invented. Most people key your car or leave bad Yelp reviews. Rick Prime invented omni-genocide technology. This is like bringing a Death Star to a fistfight, except worse, because at least the Death Star only destroys one planet at a time. He could have just killed one Diane and called it even, but no, he had to erase her from all realities just to prove a point. The point being, I'm the smartest and pettiest Rick, which, congrats buddy, you definitely proved that before Rick C137 turned you into a blood puddle. Now Evil Morty has the schematics, and everyone's living under threat of potential deletion. He can't actually USE it without making infinite enemies kill someone across all dimensions, and every version of their family across infinity will hunt you down. Imagine getting added to infinite revenge lists. Simultaneously, absolute nightmare scenario, but the threat maintains the peace. It's mutually assured destruction, except, instead of two countries with nukes, it's one teenager with an eye patch who could end any concept at any time. The weapon is too dangerous to fire, but too useful to destroy, so it exists in this cursed state of, please nobody have a bad enough day to use this. The really dark implication is what this means for existence itself. If you can be erased across all dimensions, were you ever really real? If every version of you gets deleted, if every choice you made gets unmade, if every timeline where you existed gets rewritten, did you ever actually exist, or were you just a probability that got corrected? This is some, if a tree falls in a forest, philosophical nightmare, except the tree never existed, and also the forest is infinite. The Omega device doesn't just kill you, it retcons you. You become the person who never was, and nobody even remembers there was something to forget, because you're gone from every reality that could remember you. The weapon still exists. The knowledge is out there. Evil Morty won't destroy it because it's his only insurance policy against Rick. You can't uninvent something this cursed once the blueprint exists. It exists forever looking at you. Every terrible invention humanity ever made that we can't take back. Someone, somewhere, will eventually rebuild it. And in infinite realities, across infinite timelines, probability guarantees someone eventually pushes the button. The question isn't if it's when, and who gets erased first. That's it for today. If you want more videos like these, subscribe to our channel.